I'd like to call to order this regular meeting of the Boulder Valley Board of Education for Tuesday, May 22nd, 2018. Chris, would you please call the roll?
Benford. Here. Fuqua. Here. Garcia. Gebhardt.
Here.
Marquis. Myers. Here. Sargent.
Here. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to remind everybody that the mission of the Boulder Valley School District is to create challenging, meaningful, and engaging learning opportunities so that all children thrive and are prepared for successful, civically engaged lives. Good evening, everybody joining us here at the Ed Center and those of you watching or listening at home. We're glad to have you observe and participate in our meetings. We'll begin, as always, with the Superintendent's Report. Dr. Stevenson, good evening.
Good evening. I hope you enjoyed chairing our meeting tonight.
Thank you.
Because we will enjoy it. I just wanted to let you know we've had so much going on the last couple of weeks here in Boulder Valley Schools. And I got a great opportunity, and I believe some of you also got this opportunity in the last week, to visit Jamestown and Gold Hill. And there's such a charm in both of those buildings. And you have your class, you know, K5 or K3 and 4-5. But a few students very committed to the school, principals who are incredibly committed, and it's just a really good feeling to visit those small mountain schools. We also, in the last week, had debates at Monarch High School, and it was a real honor to be a judge at the debates and to listen to how skilled our students are in their debating skills. It was a wonderful opportunity. We've also had a meeting with both the city and the university to talk about things that are of mutual interest to the three of us. And we had our last teacher advisory council last night, which made me very sad to say goodbye to them. They've been a wonderful group all year, have been advising me on a monthly basis, helping me think more clearly and know more about Boulder Valley schools. But we had our last meeting last night, and I'm sure Rob Anderson will enjoy them as much as I have. And then hopefully Ms. Benford will talk a bit about the Boulder Economic Summit, because she was there today. We were both there, and I'll let her tell you about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stevenson, and thank you for your comments. Are there any questions for Dr. Stevenson? Okay. Hearing none, we'll proceed to the next item on our agenda, which is public hearing and public participation. Thank you. The board recognizes the value of public comment on issues related to the operation of the schools. To ensure that our meeting is conducted in an orderly manner, we ask that persons who address the board confine your comments.
I hate to be rude, but I think I forgot something.
Oh, please.
I am so sorry. I am so sorry. We have our Japanese exchange students here tonight, and I think probably they don't want to have to stay for the whole meeting. Have I got that right, guys? Could we have our exchange students please come up here? Come on, you guys. I apologize.
No, it's an honor to meet them. Thank you.
Well, as soon as I looked out and saw them, I thought, oh my goodness, they probably don't want to be with us for the whole night, so we need to move on. And we are very excited to welcome these 8 students and their sponsor to our community. This is the 51st year of this cultural exchange. Students spend 6 weeks with us, rotating host families between 5 of our communities. On alternating years, one representative from each of our high schools spends an amazing 6 weeks in Japan. The experiences that these students and our students have during this time really are life-altering. So all of you, welcome to Boulder. It is so nice to have you. We have some gifts for you. The first thing we have for you are something that we in Boulder all love. They are our Boulder shirts. So when you run the Boulder next Monday, you will have the right shirt. We also have for you a book honoring the 40-year anniversary of the Boulder. You can see we're a little bit single-minded thinking about the Boulder. So we hope that you continue to have a wonderful experience in Colorado. Is there somebody who can tell us what else you're going to be doing?
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit.
Okay.
I'm Mike Kleinkoff. I've been teaching Japanese at Boulder High for 24 years and at Casey for 8 years. And so I've been a part of the program since 1995. This is Aki Kumagai, and he'd just like to say just a few words to you all, and then that'll be it.
Nice to meet you. My name is Akinori Kumagai. I am a mathematics teacher from Tokyo Jitsugyo High School in Japan. And we came to Colorado State April 28th. And we will go back to Japan June 12th. This exchange program started 51 years ago. And we have had a wonderful, so many experiences. Thank you for entertaining us. Thank you.
Well, we want to thank you for being here. It's wonderful to have you. I hope that you enjoy your time here and that you have been treated very, very well by our host families, I suspect. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else? Any other comments? Are we good?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sorry, we forgot something to. The school had a yearbook that they wanted to be sure to give you from their school. It's an ongoing tradition. So they've been handing them over since 1968. So here's another one to add to the collection, and it's just from their school, and yeah, it's for the board for the district.
I think we're all forgetting everything tonight. What can we say? This is just fabulous. I want to say thank you to each and every one of you. We will put this in an honored place, and I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for being here, and thank you for this gorgeous book.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Just going to wait 1 second. All right, back to public participation. We ask that persons who address the board confine your comments to matters that are germane to the business of the school district. Speakers on agenda items will be heard first, followed by those speaking on non-agenda items. Limit your presentation to 2 minutes. If we go over the first hour, public comment will continue at the end of the meeting. Recognize that students often attend or view our meetings. Speakers' remarks, therefore, should be suitable for an audience that includes kindergarten through 12th grade students. The board vice president may interrupt, warn, or terminate a participant's statement that is unrelated to the business of the district or inappropriate for K-12 students. There is a lighting system on the podium, starting at green when your 2 minutes starts, turning to yellow when you have 30 seconds remaining, and turning to red at the end. When the light turns red, please wrap up your comments so that the board can hear from the maximum number of speakers. Speaking to agenda items, we have 33 participants who have signed up, and we'll just start at the top of the list. Starting with Leila Dayme.
All right, I've never done this. May I start?
Absolutely. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And hasn't been anything else that has had me come up and stand in front of the board before. I'm a mother of 2 girls. I live in Boulder. We've enjoyed the range of schools that Boulder BVSD has to offer. We've done private, we've done charter, we've done neighborhood schools, and we've enjoyed all of them. My girls are so different. There is no one school that will fit both of those kids. They've been in different schools their entire education. Me considero latina tanto como norteamericana. I believe in a broad range of education, including bilingual, including math focus. Whatever it is that the kids need, that's what I believe in. I don't understand what is being considered, and I wish I did, and perhaps before the end of this meeting, someone could explain about the proposal to change the allocation of funds to charter schools. I don't understand who benefits from this change. This meeting was opened with a discussion about BVSD's mission statement, and what I wrote down was challenging, meaningful for all children. It didn't say for only neighborhood schools. It also said for all children, and the charter schools are part of that. I don't see anywhere where the mission of BVSD embraces discrimination, not in classes, not in open enrollment, and certainly not in funding. As when you're a parent in a charter school, you do things like clean toilets, clean rooms, because there isn't ever enough funding, and we're willing to do that. I ask you please, as a taxpayer, as a mother, and as a resident, to uphold your commitment to charter schools, maintain transparency, honesty, the original purpose of the mill levy, maintain equity and fairness, and allocate funds equitably. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Susan Nagle.
Thank you, and thank you for serving, all of you. I also have not stood here before. My name is Sue Nagle. My husband and I are Boulder residents and have been paying property taxes here for 14 years. Our children have followed a track of elementary school in the traditional schools, followed by charter school for middle school, and back to the traditional schools for high school. Thank you for giving us this choice for our children. That has been really excellent, including the charter school that they've attended for middle school. I'm here to ask you, on behalf of myself and my husband, to not reduce the per pupil funding for charter schools while holding the traditional schools funding constant. I think that would be unfair to the students of BVSD, the parents who you gave a choice to, and the taxpayers. I urge you to make the fair decision for the students, parents, and taxpayers of BVSD, and in this very important matter. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Jennifer Bradfield.
Good evening. My name is Jennifer Bradfield. I live within BVSD, and I have voted in favor of every education mill levy for the last 25 years. I'm also a peak-to-peak parent. Peak-to-peak enrollment is available to any student in the district through the standard BVSD open enrollment process. And contrary to some misconceptions, there are no entrance exams, there is no tuition. Peak-to-Peak is a public charter school, and it is part of BVSD. Regarding HB 1375, I'd like to respectfully request that the Board of Education look at the intent of the law, which, to my understanding, is meant to address the inequitable funding of public charter schools in many districts across the state. BVSD does not have this problem. It is already sharing its mill levy overrides at a level exceeding that required by the law, and it's serving all students in the district equally, regardless of where they choose to attend school. There's much discussion among the board about looking at program-level funding as a basis for distributing public monies to our public charter schools. Why single out these schools in particular? They serve a broad spectrum of students in our district. If the board is interested in funding based on programs at particular schools, they should be looking at all schools in the district, not just charters. We all have English language learners. We all have students who receive special education services. We all have students from a broad range of socioeconomic backgrounds. We all have some students who can walk to school and others who require transportation. We are all in this together to serve and educate all the students in our district, including those who open enroll into any of our district schools. Our BVSD charter schools have been quite successful. They provide students with excellent educations and serve as role models and for schools and for educational methods across the entire country. Please continue along the right and equitable path of funding them as you do all other schools in the district. Thanks for your consideration.
Thank you. Next, we have Lina Shi. Lina Shi. Paul Logan. Paul Logan. Michelle Logan. Frank Bruno.
Good evening, members of the board, Superintendent Stevenson, and members of the staff. My name is Frank Bruno. I reside here in Boulder, and I'm speaking tonight as the parent chair of the Board of Directors of Horizons K-8. Let me begin by thanking you for your public service and all that you do for our children. I deeply understand that it's not always popular to do the work that you do, and I appreciate it. I understand that later this evening you will be discussing the plan associated with House Bill 1375 regarding the distribution of local mill levy override revenue. As a co-chair of the 3A bond campaign a few years back, I understand that the needs across the district are great and are varied. I also understand that our charter schools are significant engines of innovation in the district, and many of the pathways we pioneer later are adopted by the district and the innovation schools. While the bill enables a redistribution, I would urge careful consideration of the potential impacts as well as the possibility of unintended consequences. I trust the judgment of this board and staff, and I know that you will consider all appropriate options to maintain funding levels at 100% of the per pupil revenue while still pursuing equity. Each of the schools and the charters may have a different focus. Horizons K-8 has a unique focus on special education, combined with small class size and a very deliberate utilization and partnership with community resources, which makes the school unique. We are pleased with the progress we are making, and we urge you to allow us to continue this special relationship and this special bond. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Kelly Reeser.
Good evening, members of the board and superintendent. My name is Kelly Reeser, and I'm the Executive Director of Education at Peak to Peak. I'm here tonight with 3 requests regarding your implementation of House Bill 1375. Number 1, honor our contract. In 2015, we negotiated our contract in good faith with specific terms related to each of the mill levies. The language in our contract could not be more clear, and the district has made commitments to us on which we have based our multi-year budget forecasts. Our current programs and staffing depend on these forecasts. BVSD has a responsibility to honor its commitments. We have enjoyed a collaborative and professional relationship with BVSD for a number of years, and we do not want to be in an adversarial position. However, if the district takes steps that conflict with our contract, we will be forced to take legal action. That route is certainly not a good use of time or taxpayer dollars. Please don't force that legal challenge. Number 2, honor the intent of House Bill 1375. This law was passed to give charter schools across the state equal access to local funding, not to reduce funding to schools that were already receiving 100% of this money. Our students are also your students, and we believe they deserve to be funded at the same rate that students attending traditional public schools do. Number 3, stop conflating the topic of mill levy funding with purchase services and special populations. These are separate issues and unrelated to the substance of the mill levy ballot language that was used in each instance to persuade voters to approve them. Your discussions have had the effect of pitting traditional public schools against charter public schools, which is unnecessary and counterproductive to students' best interests. Get the facts about what charter schools pay for purchase services and how we serve our special populations. Stop setting up false dichotomies that force people to choose sides. The law does not require this, and we are not here to take sides. We should all be on the same side, and that is the side of our students. I'm here advocating for all BVSD students, regardless of what type of school they attend. And I'm also asking BVSD to live up to its motto of equity and excellence for all students. Thank you.
Kyle Matthews. He made it. My note says you might be a little late.
Thank you very much. I am Kyle Matthews. I'm the high school principal at Peak to Peak. I appreciate the opportunity to share my feedback. Thank you very much for being here and for your service tonight. I'm very concerned about the discussions coming from this Board of Education Center staff that indicate intentions to reduce essential charter school funding in Boulder Valley via HB 1375. Not only would this significantly and unfairly impact Boulder Valley students and families, this would also be a major aberration from the district's honored and historic relationship with charter schools. I've been a teacher and a leader at Peak to Peak for the past 16 years. Throughout my time here, we've operated on a mantra of doing what's best for all students. This has been with Dr. Garcia, with Dr. King, with Dr. Messenger, and all the way through. So that's why our collaborations with district leadership, schools, families, staff, and teams are deep for nearly 20 years running. That's why we've earned equal funding on all levies. We've put students at the center, just like BVSD has. Thanks to building the trust for so many years, aligning on the district improvement plans, leading initiatives alongside every district leader, it's why we garnered that 10-year contract. It wasn't just sleight of hand or anything else. We worked hard for those through negotiations. We work for and with BVSD students. Our charters help us flexibly address the needs of all of our learners, and that's why the families choose to be part of Peak to Peak. It's also why I wear this Vanderbilt lanyard, because Peak to Peak was the first to bring in Eye to Eye. And if you know anything about Eye to Eye mentoring, it's for students with identified learning disabilities. And those are the students who come to Peak to Peak. In some cases, they're twice exceptional. In a lot of cases, it's because they have a learning disability that needs direct service. Our teachers, our staff, our kids, they know each other well enough to meet those needs every single day. That's why you all decided to bring Eye to Eye to the rest of BVSD too. So thanks for your partnership. Please don't take away that funding.
Thank you. Johannes Thomason, and then the last name's cut off, so I apologize.
Johannes Thomason Larson. Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon. My name is Johannes Clayton Thomason Larson, and I'm proud and extremely humbled to be here representing Boulder Prep's graduating class of 2017. I'm also extremely proud to say that I've been attending Boulder Valley schools since I was 3 years old. When I started at the high schools that previous to Boulder Prep, what was advertised to be a smaller classroom environment with more individual need assessment than the competing schools, it turned out to be a place where students could easily slip through the cracks and very rarely be addressed one-on-one on a regular basis. After 3 years of ignorance on my part, I was pulled aside by a school counselor who told me that if I took an overloaded schedule, even if I took an overloaded schedule, it was more than likely that it would take me an additional 2 years to graduate from that school if I kept going at the same rate that I was with my credits. At that point, I decided to spend a year away from Boulder and travel to Norway, where I'm a dual citizen, and I went to what I could only describe as a boarding school for young adults who don't know what they want to do in their life after high school. When I came back, I still had the same anxiety and fear and regret that led me to that country, because I didn't know if I could graduate high school, let alone if I wanted to. That's when I found Boulder Prep. During my entry interview, Lily and Leah, who you're going to meet here in a short second, they told me that if I worked harder than I ever have in my entire life at that school, that I could get out of there in 1 year. just 4-year high school experience, which wasn't a reality for me at the time. My point is that you're going to hear from a lot of people, a lot of teachers and students. Teachers aren't just our teachers, they're family. It's my math teacher, John, my science teacher, Justin, the headmaster, Lily. They're family. And by doing, you get my point. Boulder Prep is not my old high school, they're family.
You can
Thank
finish, so thank you. Lelia Deli.
Good evening. My name is Lelia Deli. I have the privilege of being headmaster at Boulder Prep High School. We were founded in 1996 as an alternative college prep program. For 22 years, we have been serving students who were not and could not be successful in other schools. 100% of our graduates have been accepted to college. In 2002, the Department of Education recognized that alternative programs like Boulder Prep needed their own special designation. They decided to pass legislation to recognize us. It's called an alternative education campus. We're here tonight just to provide a little more information about alternative education campuses, what it means to qualify, and how that might fit into the spectrum of programs being considered for additional funding under House Bill 1375. One of the main reasons that the state established AECs is to provide a more fair accountability system to compare schools serving high-risk students. We know that our graduation rates and our college matriculation rates and our state test scores will never compete with a traditional school. We just get too many students who have major academic gaps and emotional barriers. It takes 2 to 3 times the staff to close those achievement gaps and help students really become successful. As an alternative education campus, Boulder Prep is compared to other schools serving high-risk students, rather than being compared to a traditional school. We are proud to say that based on our student achievement and our academic growth and school engagement, Boulder Prep has achieved the highest performance rating for an alternative education campus. Our success has garnered quite a bit of attention among staff in the school district, and referrals have pushed us to near capacity. This shows an increasing number of students who desperately need a smaller environment, supportive staff, and engaging curriculum to help them reach their potential.
Thank you. Next, we have Leah Arvanitis, sorry.
Hi, my name is Leaarvind Itis, and I am the Dean of Students at Boulder Prep High School. In order for a school to qualify as an alternative education campus, at least 90% of enrolled students must fit one of the following high-risk categories as outlined by the state. They must be detained, coded as a dropout, habitually truant, expelled, or homeless. These tend to be the parameters best understood by those outside of alternative education, but there is one additional category that I would like to take some time to explain. A student can fall under an other high-risk category that can include any of the following: a personal or family history of drug or alcohol use, gang involvement, child abuse or neglect, a parent or guardian in prison on parole or probation, loss of a parent or sibling, a personal or family history of domestic violence, present mental health or behavioral health issues, involvement in the foster system, or experience with significant trauma. When we last renewed our AEC designation, all but one of our students could be placed in these categories. As you can imagine, these classifications come with significant social-emotional impact, so social-emotional learning and trauma-informed care become top priority. Our staff has to simultaneously balance best practice when it comes to teaching and counseling. We are constantly addressing the academic barriers that result from these life experiences. Take, for instance, the difficulties facing a student still in the anger stage of her grief after losing a parent, or the student who feels obligated to leave school to protect his younger brother from rival gangs. We have students in the middle of trauma therapy, fighting not to relapse and lingering in our building until the last possible second because they'd rather be with us than at home. So much work has to happen even before traditional learning can begin. Additionally, with expulsions, suspensions, and behavioral issues, we also work tirelessly to employ restorative practice to ensure students are held accountable without ostracizing them further from the community. Restorative practices easily take triple the human resources to implement and about quadruple the time as compared to push-out methods of discipline. Equitable funding allows us to maintain the quantity and quality of staffing required to address our students' various needs. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, we have Taylor Van Dyke.
Hello, can you hear me? My name is Taylor Van Dyke. I am a current senior at Boulder Prep High School. One of the differences I've found between Boulder Prep and normal schools is that in most public schools that aren't charter schools, you're going to hear a lot of questions that are like, why aren't you doing well in class? Why are your grades so bad? Why can't you focus? At Boulder Prep, it's less whys and it's more, how can we help? How can we get you through this class? How can we get you through this year? How can we get you to graduation? Which is something I never thought I would see personally. I never thought I would graduate. Even before I was in high school, I was convinced I would either drop out or be dead before I could graduate. And then I came to Boulder Prep, and I found people who could help me mature emotionally, people who could help me mature socially, or, you know, in any respects, just mature. It was probably the best place I could be to learn personal responsibility. And it's honestly the best thing that's ever happened to me is finding Boulder Prep. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Justin St Onge. Sorry if I butchered your last name.
Totally fine. Used to it.
I'm sure you are.
My name is Justin St Onge. I'm a science and math teacher at Boulder Prep, and I want to provide further insight into serving high-risk students, especially within the science and math discipline. In order to effectively and successfully teach our students at Boulder Prep, especially the high-risk demographic, we have to pay particular attention to cognitive and affective factors. This means dealing with academic gaps and emotional barriers. The majority of our students haven't been and can't be successful in a traditional learning environment. So in order to engage even the most reluctant learners, we have to strive to develop curriculum that focuses on experiential and hands-on learning. This requires small class sizes and differentiated teaching strategies to meet each student's unique needs. And even with 90-minute class periods like we have at Boulder Prep, most students need tutoring outside of the class time to fully be successful in their science and math classes. Our teachers make themselves available for homework lab every day to 5, 6 p.m. and provide added one-on-one time for these students to be actually successful. Alternative learning environments that give high-risk students an opportunity to flourish not only require extra time and energy from the teacher's side, but extra expenses for hands-on experiential learning materials inside the classroom. To provide an example, one problem we commonly see in our math classes relates to students' difficulty processing mathematical problems and spatial confusion. And what we've seen is students are better able to visualize math concepts and gain insight into necessary fundamentals when they use hands-on models. Beyond the extra time in homework lab, we spend evenings, precious hours at home preparing lessons that will make our students more excited to learn than listen to Netflix or go on social media. Getting students into our buildings is half the battle. Extra funding would be enormously impactful for our students' success and academic achievement, in addition to fostering lessons that actually make students want to come to school. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Next, we have Sasha McTeague.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
My name is Sasha McTeague, and I work as the Language Arts Chair at Boulder Prep High School. It's my goal to address teaching at-risk youth from the perspective of language arts. A Boulder Prep classroom is not a typical classroom. Our current student-to-teacher ratio is 12:1, and even that feels like a class of 25 to 30 given the various and sometimes overwhelming needs of each individual student. The spectrum of language arts skills we see ranges from severe dyslexics who struggle to make it through one chapter to budding novelists. To say at-risk youth can't handle rigorous academic standards does them a disservice. These students are more than capable, but what needs to be highlighted is the fact that it takes 2 times and sometimes 3 times the amount of effort to reach mastery and ensure they are college ready. A great example of creating a class and a classroom dynamic that serves our population is the senior capstone writing class of autobiography. This course has the students telling the stories of their hardships, traumas, and challenges in 6 essays that are revised and edited again and again to perfection, giving each student the individualized support they need to grow as writers. Teaching this course requires a lot of one-on-one instruction and extra time conferencing, reading, commenting, and proofing essays over and over again, while helping the student find the right way to tell their story. Moreover, students are only really successful when they have the one-on-one time with a teacher to help develop their writing and recover gaps in language arts education, leading to a class full of kids, all at different levels, where some need less help and others stay after school with staff as late as 7 p.m. to ensure they meet due dates and deadlines. Along with recovering education gaps, we offer classes through CU Succeed, and Succeed is exactly what they do when we have the opportunity to build them up. We are psychologists just as much as teachers, helping students conquer their inner demons to become some of the best students I have ever had the privilege of teaching. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Kenny Gillis.
Hello. I'm Kenny Gillis. I teach math and science at Boulder Prep. I would like to talk about the hidden needs of our students. By hidden needs, I mean student needs that are not as commonly talked about when discussing school budgets. Some of these hidden needs include a safe place where they can find their confidence and voice through healthy relationships with adults and their peers. They need to feel respect, trust, connection, safety from judgmental teachers, safety from bullying, and someone to show them their true potential. So how do we meet these needs? Boulder Prep is a small, inclusive, family-like community that strives to create a welcoming, safe environment. One way that the staff tries to foster this environment is by meeting for 3 hours a week to discuss each student's social, emotional, and academic progress. At our weekly staff meetings, we come up with interventions to help each student. There's no staff break room. We spend our breakfast and lunches eating with our students. We don't have enough classrooms or offices, so teachers work in our commons area among the students. This helps maximize our time spent building relationships and being available when crisis hits. When a student is having a rough time because of things going on at home or at school, it's essential to have staff readily available to help stabilize the student and get them back to class. Since we are a small community, we notice the little things like a doodle that says, "I hate my life," or a fresh cut on a forearm. We know that graduation is the goal, but some days all we can do is try to keep students alive. What does it take to address the hidden needs of our students? It comes down to building positive relationships, which requires time. Time to ask questions, time to listen, and time to help them academically, socially, and emotionally. BVSD prides itself in excellence and equity. For our students to truly achieve excellence, we must have equity. Tonight's conversation is not about which school gets how much money, but to make sure every student receives what they need to succeed. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, we have Will Cohn.
Hello. Hello. My name is Will Cohn. I'm a graduating senior at Boulder Prep. I'm graduating this Friday, but I'm here because this is really important to me. See, I was told that high school is horrible, and you just have to live through it. And before I came to Boulder Prep, I wasn't sure if I would live through it. It's accepted by a lot of people that high school is a horrible experience, but Boulder Prep is special. It's special and it's necessary, and it's an amazing resource that this school district is incredibly lucky to have. The schools I've been to were too large to teach me. They teach seas of students or no one at all, and that system only works because of places like Boulder Prep that are here to catch the students who they allow to slip through the cracks. We've saved kids from dropping out, from giving up, from killing themselves when any other school would have pushed them over the edge. It gives them a community where they're individually noticed and encouraged and helped. It pushed me to be a far better student than I thought I could be. At my old school, I was just another kid failing algebra because I wasn't confident enough to get the help I needed. Last year, I was a junior taking calculus. I got an A, and it was because I had a small class and a teacher who was able to work with me every step of the way. While I was in high school, my best friend died. It's not something any high school student should be going through. We're not built to grieve and learn physics at the same time. Boulder Prep understood that, and it became my haven. The school teaches empathy as naturally as it teaches academics. Everyone, teachers and students, were there any time I needed a shoulder to cry on, words of support, or even motivation to make it to the end of the day. They knew how hard it was for me to be at school, and they did everything in their power to help me. People don't believe me when I said I loved high school. This past year especially has been one of the happiest and most productive times of my life. I'm leaving high school with some of the best friends I've ever made, and a lot of them are teachers who took the time to get to know me. So prep is special to me. It's become my home and my family and my inspiration. I will take the lessons they've taught me about compassion and perseverance with me wherever I go after this, and Boulder Valley is lucky to have a school like this in their district. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Glenn Mosier.
Good evening. The headline on my computer this morning read, Supreme Court rules, yes, contracts actually do mean what they say. Yesterday's landmark ruling is pertinent because it reaffirms something some on this board do not respect. A contract between Peak to Peak Charter School and BVSD is not a plaything. It's a legal document that some of this on this board endeavor to break in an unprovoked attack on the school and its students. Whether your value system is of the ancient truths from the Middle East, the Far East, or just west of I-25, I know of no faith that encourages you to prey on the young and destroy their dreams. The enlightened know in our hearts, in life, the strong protect the weak, and the elders wisely teach the young. I wondered how you would build a curriculum around the breaking of a sacred contract, engendering an outcome to hurt children, teenagers, families, and faculty. What textbook would teach a school board with a philosophical bent against charter schools can become a law unto themselves? What scholarly articles would suggest a school board would peddle the idea Colorado's legislature passed a law which encouraged the breaking of contracts? There are no such documents, but thankfully there is common sense, which suggests the enlightened community who fought to build a school against long odds, today recognized as one of the best in the nation, will simply lay down and tell their children their dreams are not worth fighting for. In wartime, despots often use youth as cannon fodder, lining them up in front of soldiers or weaponry, satisfied to see their lives destroyed and shattered for an evil philosophy. When those wars end, these despots are tried as criminals. In the court of public opinion, a school board who employs the same tactic deserves the same fate. You may think you can take a vote in the middle of the summer and trick the public, but you are mistaken. And I'll finish here. So I beseech those in this board with open minds to reject the deceivers who live in the unenlightened past. Stand with us for all the dreams of youth and families. Stand with the teachers. Stand with the law. Do what is right. Believe in the future. Thousands will support you if you do. Thank you.
Next, we have Sam Todd.
Thank you, Board, for allowing me to speak. I have 3 items I want to talk about. The first is the intent of House Bill 1375. The state legislators who crafted the language and voted to approve the law intended to level the playing field for charter schools in districts that were not sharing mill levy overrides with them. The intent was certainly not to encourage districts who already were sharing equally to pull back funding. Secondly, the program approach that Boulder Valley is considering with multiple scenarios is a form of backpack funding, which would be illegal unless it's applied in the same way to every school in the district, which is not the approach that the board is looking at this point in time. To only apply this to individual charters is unfair and unethical. And lastly, honor our contract. Peak to Peak negotiated in good faith with Boulder Valley School District in 2015 and agreed to a 10-year contract, which both parties agreed to. The board is now considering to unilaterally undo the good faith that went into the contract negotiations based on its interpretation of House Bill 1375. This would put Peak to Peak in a very vulnerable place with regards to its funding and allow the board to annually review its mill levy funding with charters and possibly reduce it based on an approach that it wants to take. We are simply asking that BVSD honor its contract with Peak to Peak. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Megan Lukens.
Hello, and thank you for having me. My name is Megan Lukens, and I currently teach 10th grade AP Government and Economics at Peak to Peak Charter School. I'm honored to be a teacher in the Peak to Peak community and an employee at Boulder Valley School District. I look at BVSD as a district that is leading our country in innovation, learning, and equity, and I know that these great strides in education directly correlate to the hard work you put in at the district level. Since BVSD is committed to being a leader in education, I'm shocked to hear that the district is considering moving backward in regards to the charter schools in our district. The Charter School Mill Levy Equalization Law was designed to help charter schools across our state, and I'm disappointed to hear BVSD is looking to use this law to potentially decrease funding to charter schools in our district. On April 27th, I marched at our state capitol with thousands of other teachers. I'm thrilled to hear the Colorado legislature is responding to the requests of teachers across the state. However, if BVSD reduces mill levy override revenues to charters to 95%, then this would directly contradict the intention of the Charter School Mill Levy Equalization Law. It is widely known that schools are underfunded, and this directly impacts teacher salaries. I'm already a Lyft driver in the evenings and on the weekends. Additionally, I will be working 3 jobs this summer in hopes that I can add any small amount into my savings account. A decrease in charter school funding could potentially impact my salary. Decreasing the amount of funding that charter schools are receiving would negatively impact real students, teachers, and administrators in our district. Charter schools have been increasingly politicized, even though people who work at charters are dedicated educators who work extremely hard and care deeply about the students and their futures, just like our counterparts at schools across the district, state, and nation. We deserve to be treated with equality and respect. The trend in the country is moving towards more funding for schools, not less. I ask of you to please keep the mill levy funding for charters at 100%. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Phil Mahalko.
Good evening, and thank you all for your service. It's hard to follow all these comments, but I'll try. The Colorado State Legislature passed the Mill Levy Equalization Act by wide margin. It wasn't something trivial to them to guarantee equitable funding to our charter schools. They also recognized that this could cost districts programming support, so they acted again responsibly and followed up with a 6% PPR increase for this upcoming school year to compensate for this act and other negative factors. In short, I believe our state has done a great job in recognizing existing district programs and students regardless of their school type. Now, our consideration to reduce allocation to the charter schools in BVSD as permitted by Act, is basically, in my opinion, a slap in the face to the Mill Levy Equalization Act, as it was intended to enhance and not reduce funding to charters. There is no reason for BVSD to do this. Our current district mill levy plan is compliant with the Act. The Act does not create any financial burden for the district. We have a 6% PPR increase. We've also seen surpluses in our mill levy transportation funds due to recent investments, and we're looking at a 2016 mill levy increase. Furthermore, our charter schools typically buy back services from the district in excess of 12% of their annual budget, which includes administrative costs that compensate for the difference between 100% and 95% in the Mill Levy Act. So why again would we want to elect to change our allocations? I can only speculate because the district really has not communicated any revenue strategy plan. We're seeing an increase in revenue this year, and there's no plan, but there seems to be more of a buy-in and taking more away from the charter schools. I can only speculate, and the only evidence I have is from the April 10th board meeting when there was questions regarding improving gaps in programs like SPED and full-day kindergarten. These are good initiatives, and I will help the district anyway to achieve these goals, but I believe the district is trying to use the charter schools as potential income sources as prescribed by the Act. This is unconscionable, since taking away funding from the charter schools has justification for other district programs under the Mill Levy Equalization Act. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Josh Benson.
Good evening, board members. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. My name is Josh Benson. I'm a teacher at Peak to Peak Charter School in Lafayette. I've been at Peak to Peak for 8 years since I moved to Colorado from my previous teaching position at Northeastern University in Boston. I would like to address some concerns I have about the discussions related to the distribution of mill levies in our district. There's no doubt that Peak to Peak and other charters, it sounds like other wonderful charters in our district, add value to the state, to the district, and most importantly to the lives of our students. Our track record of serving students and families is clear. The success of charters and of BVSD as a district is one of the reasons why I decided to move my family across the country to this district. Traditionally, as you know, BVSD has shared 100% of mill levy overrides passed by voters in our district, and no doubt that is based on the positive relationships between charters and the district. The state of Colorado recognized the need for this type of positive relationship with the passage of HB 1375, known as the Charter School Mill Levy Equalization Law, which seeks to raise funding for charter schools across the state. While the school board would seek to use this law as a justification to potentially reduce funding for charter schools in the district is puzzling at best. I contacted Representative Brittany Peterson, Representative Lang Cias, Senator Owen Hill, and Senator Angela Williams, who sponsored HB 1375, to see if reducing funding for charter schools was the goal of their bill. I also contacted my local representative, Mike Foote, who voted in favor of the bill. Legislators were interested in the school board's interpretation of the bill and sought additional information about the plans being discussed by BVSD to potentially reduce charter funding. Today, I signed my contract for next year. If the school turned around and said that would be upheld up to 95% and the other 5% would be negotiable based on added duties, I would feel like that would be a break of contract, and more importantly, I think it would set a poor moral example for my students, my family, and our community. Please set a strong moral example. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Jamie Miller.
Thank you. My name is Jamie Miller, and I am a parent of 2 charter school students at Peak to Peak Charter School, and I'm a member of the board of directors at Peak to Peak. I'm proud of what I'm hearing tonight from our charter community, and I want to touch on my own concerns through the lens of using backpack funding as a model for drawing funds away from charter schools. For example, one of your backpack funding ideas involves potentially removing the transportation mill levy funding for charters because they do not provide busing to school. There are no 2 district schools alike in terms of how many walk, take the school bus, public transportation, or are dropped off by parents. I watch my neighbor drive her children to Aspen Creek every day to avoid the bus, but I know that her child would get more funding if this change were made than mine would, who goes to a charter school. This seems very arbitrary to me. Voters approve your mill levy funding with all district students in mind. A BVSD charter student is not worth less than a BVSD traditional school student. Funds raised by the transportation mill levy free up general fund dollars that all district students should have access to, not just students who attend traditional public schools. Please do not punish our students' hard work or our schools' accolades. True up funding where necessary, and please don't move forward with a scenario that takes charter funding away. Thank you for considering this very seriously, and thank you for your service.
Thank you. Next, we have Mary Wood.
Hi, good evening. My name is Mary Catherine Wood, and I've been a taxpayer in the city of Boulder for 17 years, a homeowner in North Boulder for 13 years, and a fervent supporter of public education my entire life. Through graduate school, I'm also the parent of 3 elementary students who attend Columbine and Crestview elementary schools. I have proudly supported every mill levy override for as long as I can remember, for as long as I've been in Boulder, because I know that investing in all of our students in BVSD is the only way to invest in our future as an active and participatory democracy. In this era of embarrassing state funding shortages, where Colorado ranks 46th in teacher pay and 42nd in per pupil funding, BVSD has led the way in putting students first and providing teachers with professional pay, as Superintendent Dr. Stevenson expressed in her letter to BVSD families not too long ago. However, BVSD has led the way primarily due to taxpayers like myself putting students first with my mill levy override vote. It would be a shame and a mockery to then reduce funding for a handful of our students, those in your charter schools. In addition to my role as a BVSD parent, I am entering into my 8th year as a charter school teacher in BVSD, first at Summit Middle Charter and now at Peak to Peak. I can say without exception that my students, along with each student in our district, deserve the very best that BVSD has to offer. And choosing to relinquish its leadership role in charter funding sends a clear message to my students, to their families, and to me, their teacher, that we matter less and we are worth less than other students in the district. Peak to Peak continues to forge a new path in education through its focus on inclusion, on equity, and on innovation. We foster creativity, resilience, and positive risk-taking in our students, regardless of race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, school choice decisions, or their home address. I know that BVSD values this type of education too, and therefore I encourage you to walk your talk and not cut funding to our charter schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Elizabeth Perez.
I had the long walk. Thank you, Board and Dr. Stevenson. I'm here this evening to speak as a voter and a taxpayer, as well as a parent of students at Peak to Peak. First, I, though, want to say that I am humbled by the wonderful stories from the educators and students that are in the room today, and we should all be grateful for all the hard work that they're doing. What I'm going to focus on instead are the concerns that I have regarding the failure to uphold contractual commitments that have previously been made. I have significant reservations around following that type of precedent, and I think it would reflect very poorly on BVSD. We would expect all of our contracts to be upheld appropriately. More importantly, I also have some concerns around the voter intent and the apparent potential disregard for that intent. It is disingenuous for BVSD to disregard voter intent for local tax dollars. The mill levies, as we've heard already this evening, were approved for all schools, including charter schools. And I'm worried about the precedent that this sends, and I'm worried about the message and the potential bias that this could create. I think our ask specifically as a parent of two daughters who attend Peak to Peak is a reasonable one, and that is one that will be both fiscally and philosophically correct. The funding decision should be made to continue to even up all charter schools at 100%. If the district gave charters 100% of their share of the mill levy override money based on enrollment, the amount would increase by about $500,000 total. However, the district is considering scenarios that show Peak to Peak alone losing more than $1 million in annual revenue per year. This would devastate our schools, this would devastate our teachers, this would devastate our students, and would not allow for many of the successful stories that we've heard presented here this evening. I implore you now as a parent to consider delivering on the promise of excellence for all of our students and to continue to allow for the appropriate funding. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Colleen Elliott.
Good evening, and thank you for your time this evening. I'm Colleen Elliott, and my husband and I are BVSD and Peak to Peak parents. We've always been very proud to be part of BVSD and within the district, and very fortunate to be part of the Peak to Peak community, and even more proud this evening after hearing these incredible stories from the schools within our district. I believe BVSD board members are charged with representing all students, regardless of which school they attend within the district, and whether they attend charter or traditional schools. Please do not pull funding from your district charter schools, all of which already operate at a fiscal disadvantage. Scenarios that reduce funding to Peak will greatly hamper our ability to achieve our mission for the BVSD students who are enrolled here. Students should receive equitable funding and not be punished or discriminated against for the BVSD's public school they choose to attend. It's inequitable and unfair for the district to make changes to how revenue is distributed to charters if those same changes aren't applied to traditional schools. Peak to Peak wants to maintain the collaborative relationship that they've worked so hard to build with BVSD and hopes the district will also honor the good faith effort that went into the 2015 contract negotiations. Peak to Peak does an excellent job at financial planning and has based its short-term and long-term financial planning on the terms of that 10-year contract. The contract negotiated and signed with BVSD. The district should honor the terms it agreed to and continue to be an example of ethical and sound business practices for anyone that you enter into a contract with. Shifting funds away from charter school students to the scenarios you are considering not only violates the agreement, but it's also a misuse of the new law. Moving to a backpack funding model will hamstring all charters' ability to plan long-term, and this was never the intent of the law, as we've heard quite a bit this evening. Please do not pull funding from your district charter schools. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Next, we have Evelyn Grady.
Hi, good evening. My name is Evelyn Grady. I'm a parent of 2 Peak to Peak students, as well as a freshly minted Peak to Peak graduate. I'm also the school's board of directors secretary. When our family had an opportunity to move and relocate 11 years ago, we specifically chose Colorado and this area as it allowed for open enrollment and, more importantly, a choice to find the best fit for the educational needs of our students, and they are very different needs. The parents, guardians, and students of Peak to Peak Charter School expect the district to honor its contract with us. The letter of the law, HB 1735, indicates nothing about pulling back funding or treating charter schools differently than other district schools. You know our charter schools operate with less funding from the get-go at a quite significant level, a burden that is shouldered by our dedicated faculty and staff in terms of pay. Using this new law as an opportunity to carve funding away from us is unfair and certainly not a step forward to equity. it would be quite the opposite. Please honor the new law and the commitments you've made to our students and your voters and your students. We're all in this together. These two things are not in conflict with each other. They're not mutually exclusive. Lastly, I would like to remind you that the charter schools in your district, in our district, have generated so many success stories. Peak to Peak's graduating class of 2018 received more than $23 million in scholarship opportunities, and we're ranked one of the top schools in the state and country. We should all be very proud of that, all together. We should be talking about ways to leverage these successes, not pushing them away or carving away our budget. Thank you very much for listening, and thank you very much for recognizing that we're in this all together. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Mary Davis.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to be here, and thank you very much, all of you, for your service. I'm here representing a family of long-term Boulder residents. In fact, my husband is a product of the Boulder Valley school system. He attended public schools all the way through and graduated from Fairview, although I won't tell you which year. He wouldn't appreciate that. We have a daughter who's finishing 5th grade at Bear Creek Elementary, and we have had a wonderful experience there and really enjoyed our time there. As we looked for options for junior high, we sort of assumed that she'd continue on to Southern Hills. But we started to hear more and more about Summit as an option. We attended a couple of information sessions, talked to different families who attend there, and it became clear to us that it would be a great fit for our daughter, both socially and academically. We were so happy to have the choice offered by having a strong charter within our school district. It's a differentiator in our community to have a network of excellent charter schools that are as well funded as our traditional public schools. And it's so good that our charters have enjoyed support from BVSD, even things like coordinating on calendars so that school day off programs are available to families like ours where both parents work outside the home. Middle school in particular can be a daunting transition, and we are so glad that our daughter had the option to choose between several really solid schools, which one would best meet her needs. She's excited about middle school, and to me as a parent, that's absolutely critical. We're not only parents, but we're homeowners. We expect that our tax dollars will go to support all students in our community, whether they attend a traditional public school or a charter public school. I'd like to ask the board not to use House Bill 1375 to reduce funding to charter schools in our area. It was intended to create the parity which Boulder already enjoys, and it would put our programming and teaching and mostly our students at risk. Let's continue to be a community that leads in supporting learning and choice. Those are fundamental Boulder values. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Eddie Gilmartin. Eddie Gilmartin, or something close to that? Okay. Shirley White. Shirley White. Mark Boyer.
Good evening. Thank you for your time. My name is Mark Boyer. I'm the parent of 3 children here in Boulder Valley, 2 of whom attend Summit Middle School and who are severely dyslexic. I believe that the partnership in between the Boulder Valley School District and parents is just that, a partnership, and that providing funding to each school equally and 100%, which you've done for years, is imperative. It's a partnership because we get to choose where our children go and the right place for them to be. We found that at Summit Middle School for our children, and it's invaluable. It's why we're here. To reduce the funding to choose makes you judge and jury over where our kids go and what they do, and that's not okay. We should be able to do that in partnership. Let's fund all the schools as you have at 100% on an ongoing basis, so that we can work together to find the right place for our children to go. You heard it earlier. It takes a village, takes a bunch of different schools. Let's fund them all equally, the way you've been doing, and set the great example you've been doing to date. Our options are unbelievable in Boulder. Let's keep it that way and not make you guys judge and jury. You shouldn't have to do that. Let's just fund them all equally. So, thank you. I don't envy your job. We'll go with that.
Thank you. Next, we have Keith Samber. Keith Samber. Laura Mancini-Chan.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Laura Mancini-Chan, and I'd like to add my voice in support of all of those who've spoken before me tonight, asking you to maintain equal funding for charter schools. I'm a parent, a homeowner in Boulder, and I supported the mill levy as well with the belief that our schools would all be funded equally. As with some of the others here tonight, when we moved to Boulder 4 years ago, a key decision-making component for us was the availability of choice in the schools. And we very much are proud to be here and happy that we have so many wonderful options. My older son is finishing up 5th grade this year, and we recently went through the open enrollment process. He selected Summit as his first choice, and we were thrilled to get in. We're very much looking forward to that experience, and I was chagrined to receive the communication from the school that funding is in jeopardy, and that's why I came here tonight. When we toured Summit, as well as several other schools that also were excellent alternatives, for my son, one of the key things was he counted 19 familiar faces among the students. So these were children that he knows from his elementary school, from sports activities, from scouts, from activities throughout Boulder. So my point in mentioning that is that the student body and the families are embedded throughout our community. We're all supporters of the schools here, and we all pay taxes with the hope that they are funded equally. So I would urge you, please, to keep that in mind when you vote in June and maintain equal funding for our charter schools. And thank you for your continued dedication to our children.
Thank you. The next speaker or presenter is Richard Stevenson.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. I just wanted to thank everybody for showing up and, giving such passion, points of view. And I've learned actually a lot tonight about how important this issue is. So I'm appreciative of that. And I wanted to thank you all for your service and the job that you do. I think that Boulder Valley has incredible schools and it's incredible choice. And it's one of the big factors in why we moved here as a family. It was really important to my wife, myself, for our children. And, one of the things I think that you guys have done a fantastic job of is this 100% proportional funding. I think that, I really value that on a fundamental philosophical level. I don't see how anything else makes sense, quite frankly. In fact, it's interesting to see that, in this debate, if it is a debate, there's been only one side from the community, from the teachers, from the students. I haven't heard one voice to say that we should do something different here. So I just wanted to kind of point that out. And, so I'm concerned that this 100% proportional funding is in jeopardy. And, I believe that charter schools provide a really valuable service, as you've heard from many people here. And they offer, choice to families. And they offer, as you guys value, challenging and meaningful education to the community. So, I am concerned that that's at risk. As a family, we made a choice that Oliver is going to be attending Summit Middle School, and it's a great fit for him. And, I hope and urge you guys to maintain 100% proportional funding. Thank you.
So that's it for those who have signed up for agenda items, and we have one speaker who has signed up for non-agenda items. And that is Anna Sigur.
Good evening. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children logged 10.2.
Can you hold on one moment? I'm not sure that you have the whole list. There are more speakers to agenda items, but we are at the hour mark, so.
Well, we called their names because we don't have the information that Laura needed, so maybe we can talk about that after Anna's done. Thanks.
The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children logged 10.2 million cases of online solicitation of children in 2017. They report the number is increasing exponentially each year. The unsupervised access to online chat and social media in BVSD computers serves no viable educational purpose and poses a significant risk for children. It is shocking to me that the district has failed to recognize and take action on this. I have personally spoken to a parent whose child was contacted by a pedophile on a gaming chat on BVSD device and network at school. How many more incidents do we need before the district takes action to protect the students? Please take action today and block access to gaming, block access to chats, block access to social media for all grades on the BVSD network. The risk that these communication channels create for students to fall victim to online predators outweighs the dubious link to education in the classroom. Secondly, I wanted to state that conversations that I've had with BVSD teachers have left me with the impression that they don't feel they can speak freely about their concerns about technology in the classroom. This week I spoke to a handful of BVSD teachers from the first school to go one-to-web about their experiences with technology in the classroom. Not one teacher was happy with the way technology has been deployed in the classroom, and I couldn't even find one teacher who had anything positive to say about computers in their classrooms. Here are some quotes from my conversations. A couple of months ago, after Chromebooks were introduced, some of the children started to pull back, but there are others in the class who couldn't pull themselves away from the screen. 2 months ago, I just gave up. The district never consulted with teachers about one-to-web, and they just put them there. I began losing all the mice because the students want to have them for gaming. Now I have to check them out from my desk each day. I am one teacher, and there's no way I can watch 26 screens. The students are very good at tabbing. When I started, we had a computer lab. Students would go to the lab and type out their papers and come back. Now having the screens in the classroom is a distraction. Last one, I don't use them. I know I'm a better teacher than a screen. Please conduct an independent evaluation of parents and teachers' concerns about technology in the classroom. Thank you.
So Melissa, I think maybe what we should do is just take a quick break to compare the list that I have with what you have, because we called out names, and Laura told me. So let's just take a quick break, because I'd like to try to just, if there's just a few more, it seems to make sense to finish up the public participation, if the board's all right with that. So just take a minute to look at the names. All right. So we'll just take a 2 or 3 minute break. Thank you. We're going to continue with public participation, please. Next, I will call up Paul Logan, who showed up a little late, and we're happy to accommodate him. Thank you, Mr. Logan. Hello, we're starting back, please. Could we respect the speaker? Thank you.
My name is Paul Logan. I'm a parent of BVSD students, live in the district, pay taxes here. My wife and I have 3 kids, and this fall 2 of our kids will be attending Summit Middle School. The third is also at a BVSD school, though not a charter school. So when I heard about the proposal to cut funding for charter schools only, I can tell you I was just very disturbed and confused. I couldn't understand why the funding allocation would be different. Why would we treat the students' schools differently? I think one of the things I've heard from many speakers tonight is the great diversity of student needs. And charter schools, I think, fit some of those needs. They fill those needs. And I think all these students deserve equal treatment. So I guess part of my comment is I don't understand the why. I certainly trust that you all are giving a lot of time from your lives and a lot of energy to do this work, and I thank you for it. And I'm sure that you have the very best of intentions. But I can tell you I've not spoken with one person who understands why you would have this different allocation formula for charter schools. It seems unfair. And the folks that I talk to who are other BVSD parents have the same reaction. It just doesn't make sense. We're baffled. So I would encourage you, please, to reject the proposal to cut the funding for charter schools. Please provide an equitable allocation of funding to all schools who fill the diverse needs of all the students in the district. I thank you for your service. I know you're trying to do the best thing. I don't understand why this proposal is out there, and I would encourage you to find a different way to achieve whatever objective it is that you're seeking. Please don't cut the funding for charter schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Harry Horowitz.
That's me. Sorry. Having some domestic issues. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak. I come from a long career in public service working in economic development, both here in Colorado and back in New York. And I follow the school reform debate pretty carefully. And this is very strange for me because the school reform debate has always been about what are we going to do about failing schools, right? But I've never seen a debate about what are we going to do about successful schools and how we're going to take funding away from successful schools and dedicated teachers, and we're going to reallocate it. So for those of you who have read The Prize about the drive to save New York City schools or what happened in Washington, D.C., those are serious issues where you have failing schools and overcrowded classrooms and teachers who are underpaid. That's not the situation that you have in this. So what you're doing is you're taking a working model, it seems to me at least, and you're depriving it of resources, and you're taking students who are thriving in these schools and you're sending them back into places where maybe they didn't excel as much. And that seems to me to defy all logic. And I don't really quite understand it. The second thing that I would say is that, you know, the definition of sort of prejudice is to single out one model above others, right? So when you pull somebody over because they're a certain race or class or something like that, you're engaging sort of in a prejudice system. The same goes here. If you're going to agree to have charter schools, then you fund them equally with your district schools. If you don't want charter schools at all, then do away with the whole system. But it seems to me like certain people are trying to have it both ways, which is we're going to have this entire system, but we're going to defund certain ones. And that seems to me to be sort of the definition of inequity. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Nicole Harrison. Nicole Harrison. Richard Feit.
Thanks a lot for giving us the opportunity to speak and for listening to us. I believe this board is trying to do the right thing around funding, and I appreciate that. I'm a father of 3 kids who are currently in non-charter neighborhood elementary school in BVSD. My wife, Melissa, and I are big supporters of our public schools. I myself was a neighborhood public school teacher earlier in my life. We both volunteered at our kids' neighborhood schools in BVSD. My family has had a somewhat complicated experience with the charter school program. Our son's an incoming Summit Middle School student. We applied to Summit because it felt like the one that could best meet our son's needs after a huge amount of research and soul searching, and it wasn't an easy choice. Several years ago, we couldn't get our son into a charter school that was right down the street from us, and we wondered whether the lack of neighborhood preference and non-standard school schedule was actually selecting for higher income families. Now, I'm not sure whether that's what's motivating the consideration of a different tier of per student funding for charter school kids. If so, it's worth having the conversation about that issue and facing it head on if that's the case. But what's being considered seems like a harsh and inequitable approach to the problem, or any other around differences between charter schools and non-charter schools. What's being proposed is disheartening to Melissa and me as parents of a child who needs the best and most fitting education experience possible. We're worried that we'd suddenly be faced with a school that had less funding per student than its non-charter peers, and that our son and all of his fellow students at Summit would be at a disadvantage and an unexpected one. We don't understand how that could be reasonable or okay. We ask that you keep charter schools fully funded, and that if there are underlying issues around fairness of the charter school program, that they're dealt with head on and not through this mechanism. Please keep all of our students as first-class participants in the education system. And thanks a lot for listening.
Thank you. Next, we have Pete Ferreira.
Thank you in advance for your time, attention, and service. I appreciate you've been tasked with a difficult decision. As a father of an 8 and 11-year-old and a Boulder business and homeowner for nearly 20 years, I have some concerns about this proposal. The proposed reallocation of funds is an unfair switch to taxpayers who voted in good faith. Would knowing this change was possible have changed the outcome of the vote? We'll never know. But such action erodes a community's trust in its elected officials and the system as a whole, something that's fundamentally very important. It's also an unjust change to families who chose to open enroll in a charter school in January, only to find out in February that this disadvantage might be something they would have to deal with. Despite the BVSD mission statement's focus on equity, this action is anything but. By definition, discrimination is the prejudicial treatment of different categories. This is precisely what that would be. As a father and a taxpayer and a voter, I implore you to honor the integrity of your office and the trust of those who voted for you by representing the needs of all students, dedicated teachers, and staff equally. I wish you luck with your decision.
Thank you. Next, we have Hank Dalton.
Thank you and good evening. I'm Hank Dalton. I'm a grandparent and of a child at Peak to Peak, also the president of the board of directors at Peak to Peak. Everything that I would say has already been said, and in often many times more eloquent than what I could say. So I want to thank those who came out this evening to say these things. I want to thank the board for its time. I want to thank those of you with whom we've been able to have contact for your time and your effort. I just urge you not to go down the path of reducing charter school funding in BVSD. Thank you.
And I think this is our last speaker, Pete Salas.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. Not only am I a parent of 2 Boulder Valley School children who I might add are doing quite well in their neighborhood school, for which I am very proud. Just to note, I'm not here to speak about the charter schools, but I wasn't opposed to the notion when it first came up. However, I believe it's correct that if the school district has entered into contractual obligations with these schools and these parents, that those ought to stand true, and that you ought to be held accountable for those. So on that note, I'm here to speak about something else. It has to do with the bond issue, construction bonds that were issued by the school district, and really has to do with equity. And what I'm going to give you a list of things, information that I'd like to have, if not now, then perhaps later. I would like to know of the total amount of the $560 million that was awarded, how much of those funds were awarded to minority or Latino contractors. I would like to know how many minority or Latino vendors or contractors are on your preferred or pre-qualified list. I would like to know what the district plan is for outreaching to Latino minority vendors and contractors. I would like to know the amount of money spent with minority contractors and vendors in general over the last few years. I don't know if the district is a member of the Latino Chamber of Commerce or not, but I would encourage you to be one. They have resources at hand that I think would be helpful to the district. And I would like to know how does or what method do you use to vet potential vendors or contractors to ensure that they do not or have not engaged in discriminatory practices through their business. And so those are my primary concerns, and I haven't seen a lot about that recently, but I know that the district has a large percentage of Latino parents and taxpayers, and I think that the money that is raised should be distributed equitably, and that we should support our local entrepreneurs who are doing business here, particularly as they relate to minorities and Latinos. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our public participation. We appreciate hearing from our speakers this evening. We'll move on to the next item on our agenda, which is board communication. Board members who would like to begin? Don't all rush to the front of the line. Okay, Kitty?
Thank you all for coming and expressing your views. It's clear that you're very passionate about it, and I always love to see parents who are very passionate about their children. And it's always nice to see a former board member come and make a comment in front of us. So thank you, Pete Salas. One thing, somebody had in one of their comments said they were baffled, and I'm a little bit baffled too. I'm baffled and alarmed maybe that an inaccurate and inflammatory email was sent out. One of the sentences in it says, for seemingly political reasons unrelated to students' best interests, BVSD is actively looking for ways to significantly reduce local funding to Summit and the other charter schools in our district. And that is simply not true. We are not actively trying to take money away from anybody. If you looked at the proposal, the resolution that was put forward today, Summit would get, with 95% of straight per pupil funding, Summit would get $32,981 more than they're currently getting. Prep would get $8,919 more than they're currently getting. Justice would get $84,126,000 more, and Peak to Peak would get $30,211 more. So I believe this is the plan that you're urging us to reject. Now, Horizons has a good reason to urge us to reject it because they would take a loss of $10,452. So that's kind of why I'm baffled about all of this.
Sam?
Thanks to all the parents who came out, and I really also appreciated hearing from the students from Boulder Prep. I hope to visit your school soon. I think that's one I haven't gotten to yet in my time on the board. We heard the comments or the words equality and equity used tonight, and they have different meanings, and I think one of the things we're struggling with, or I'm struggling with, is what is equitable funding? We've made a decision to invest more to help students in certain categories, English language learners, special ed, students in poverty. What is the most equitable way to do that? So I think that's part of the conversation we're having. Conversation isn't over, and I've heard you tonight. I look forward to continued conversation with the charter school administrators and parents. And I just want to say how fun it was to visit Gold Hill and Jamestown schools today with you, Kathy, little mountain schools that do amazing things. We happened upon the dedication of a huge art project picnic table that was a collaboration between a University of Colorado arts professor, some engineering students, the kids at Jamestown Elementary, and it was just a wonderful community event. And I think those small mountain schools are very special places, and I was pleased to be welcomed there by the staff and the kids. Also, a couple of graduations. Shelley and I endured the Boulder High graduation on Saturday. Thank you for sharing your umbrella with me. That was helped at least keep my head dry. But you know, the kids were great, and everybody got through it, and it deserves celebration. But also, at Richard's invitation, I attended, and Kathy, I believe, attended about a week and a half ago, the different kind of graduation, the El Paso program, which trains Latino parents in how to be advocates for their kids, how to create educational environment in their home. And it's a great organizing model because the parents who are trained then train other parents, and so that kind of advocacy increases in rings from the individuals who graduated from that program. I think it was about 30 moms and dads, and it was just really inspiring to see how important they took the completion of the El Paso program, how much they value, as we all value our kids, and seeing that they get the best education possible. And so I encourage you, if you don't know anything about the El Paso program, to look that up, because it's really making a difference for Latino parents and kids in our community. So a different kind of graduation, but one that was already that was also very meaningful and moving to me. So that's it.
Thanks, Sam. Shelley?
Yes, Sam, I'd just like to point out that Cindy was also at Boulder High's graduation, toughing it out.
Yes.
Just as wet as the rest of us, but it was really a joyful occasion nonetheless. So Boulder High grads are tough. As Cindy mentioned, I went to the Monarch, or I don't know if you mentioned it, but I was also at the Monarch debates, and it was really interesting. One of the topics of the debate was whether to ban cell phones in K through 12 in the district, and I don't think they had any idea that it was a topic that we're all considering right now. So that was pretty interesting. And I'd like to point out that the kids who wanted to ban phones K through 12 were the winners in the debate. So, and then today I did attend the Boulder Economic Council Summit, and the topic of that was basically talking about the challenges that Boulder employers have sort of maintaining the workforce in Boulder, and what kinds of skills they want to see in the kids that are coming out of our school systems. And they were around things like problem solving, critical thinking, communication, collaboration, teamwork, those kinds of things. And they were urging us not to focus so much on content and much more on those skills, which I had a little issue with, but I can see their point that those other skills are also important. So I want to thank you all who came out to speak on behalf of our charter schools. Every charter school in BVSD provides a unique opportunity for kids that attend those schools, just like our traditional schools do. And just like our traditional schools, I know the charter schools are stretching their dollars as far as they can possibly go to provide the best services for our kids. I see absolutely no reason why we would use HB 1375 as any sort of excuse to reduce funding to charter schools. After a lot of discussion, and I think, Kitty, to your point, the recommendation from the district just came out this afternoon, and so a lot of people probably weren't aware that we had revised our recommendation in that regard. So it's possible that many of the people sitting here were not aware of that. So I would just say that after a lot of discussion, you know, the districts come forth with a recommendation that we distribute mill levy funding at 95%, or at the rate that the contract requires, whichever's higher. So while I think this is movement in the right direction from where we were just a week ago, I really don't see any reason to move off the 100% allocation that we are providing right now. I think there's absolutely no reason to think that that money is not being used wisely. And I agree that those kids are every bit our students, as are the kids at our traditional schools, and should be funded in the same way. The other concern I have about the recommendation that we just got today is that I believe it binds future boards to align charter school contracts in 2025 with some plan that we will have devised by then. But I'm not sure why we would put that in our resolution tonight for study, and why we wouldn't just leave it at whatever percentage of funding that we decide to do that at. I just don't even think we legally can bind a future board in that way. So I urge the board to keep our current 100% allocation for charter schools, and to honor our contracts and to maintain these really important relationships that we have with the charters. And I guess I would argue, or I would agree with the gentleman who asked why we would want to do this.
Anything else, Shelley? Okay. Donna?
Some people ask why we even want to serve on the board. And I was reminded when I went to the Monarch High School graduation why I do this. And I didn't have any kids graduating this year, but I got teary-eyed shaking all those hands and saying congratulations and you go guy or you go girl. And it was so exciting. But then I also was excited to hear about all the other graduations. There's still a couple I've got to do, or I'm going, I don't mean I've got to do it, but I'm going to do it. And another one, little known, is the Project Search graduation that Boulder Community Health Hospital hosted. And many doctors were there, and many of their paraprofessionals within the medical field were there that host our students and help our students to acquire jobs. One of the students also was trained and did an internship at Ball Aerospace and was hired by them at 30 hours a week. It was an exciting graduation to go to and hear these kiddos speak. So that was the excitement for me last week. So to all you parents sitting out there that I've had lots of correspondence with, I am not in support at all of pulling any funding from you. And I won't support anything that pulls the carpet out from under something that is doing so well within our district. And we are a model to many people within our state and within our nation. So I want to assure you, I appreciate you coming out and telling us your stories. I think that's about all I have to say.
So just have a couple comments. Along with Sam, I went to the El Paso graduation, and that was fun. And then Cindy and I attended the Parity graduation at Centaurus, which is a similar kind of graduation in that it's just graduating the parents of mostly Latino families who have successfully completed the BVSD program to help them learn how to better engage with the schools. And it reminds me a lot of going to quinceañeras to go to that with the food and the dance and the celebration. And so I love going to those. And then I won't belabor it, but I've attended the Nederland graduation and the Fairview graduation and the Centaurus graduation so far, and I'm really looking forward to going to the Boulder Prep graduation and to the Justice High. I find, like you, Donna, that even though I don't have any kids in those graduations, it's hard to make it through without a pocket full of Kleenex, because the stories and the work that you all do to help those students get to their graduation day and the pride that they feel and their families is just overwhelming. So job well done, and really looking forward to that. I also, as Sam said, went to Jamestown and Gold Hill, and that was just awesome to see the good work that's going on in those communities, and and how much those communities come around their schools, how important those schools are. Not that they're not, it's just a different feel in the mountain towns. It reminds me of my many miles I've put on traveling around Colorado to rural schools. So thank you to those schools for hosting us and for taking the time to talk with us, and we got to watch student presentations, and we even got I know you guys will all be jealous, we got a jar of honey from the Gold Hill, which I'm looking forward to spreading on something tomorrow. And then I also visited, because they were my old neighborhood schools, Bear Creek and Mesa. And I just want to point out two things that I learned while visiting Bear Creek, which we've had a lot of conversation around technology. And what they told me, because I raised the question that we'd heard at our last technology meeting, that students were being rewarded with technology time when it was their free time. And I just thought I'd share that at least at Bear Creek, their policy is to not ever allow students to use technology in their free time. They have to find some other way to use their free time, but they're not rewarded with technology. And I just thought that's their school-wide policy, and I thought that was really helpful. And what they do at the beginning of the year is in their back-to-school night, which is their best opportunity to see parents mostly parents, is their teachers then address at the beginning of the year how they're going to be using technology, in what way, what the expectations are. And I thought that was a really good way to engage families so that they know at the start of the year what technology is going to look like, how it's going to be used, and engage with their teachers at the beginning of the year about how, if they have any concerns about that. So I thought those were two good practices that at least were being implemented at one of our schools. So as we have this conversation going forward, I think that's really helpful. And then on the issue of the charter funding, I have to say, and I may be alone in this, I was really disturbed and distressed to see the emails that were sent out from the charter schools to their communities. They were inflammatory and incorrect. And while I really do appreciate parents coming and talking and engaging, I want it to be on a set of information and facts that is actually accurate. And there were many misstatements in those emails. And an email went out again this morning, even after our conversations on these topics, that again was inaccurate. And as Sam pointed out, there is a big difference between equity and equal. And I pulled up the language of 1375, and what it says, and I believe this to my core, that we have the duty to ensure that the school district allocates its resources in a manner that results in the equitable treatment of all students enrolled in the school district, according to their individual needs, regardless of the type of school district in which each student is enrolled. And I think we heard, again, it was hard not to want to even cry a little when we heard the stories from the Boulder prep students and teachers about how much more it takes and how many more resources it takes to help those students who have faced trauma and a whole host of issues in their lives to get them across the finish line. And I believe in differentiated student funding to my core. I don't think that every student takes the same amount of money to be successful. And I think that's a core value of Boulder Valley, and I hope that we continue holding that value as we go forward in these conversations. So I hope that we can lower the tenor of the emails that are going out and the tenor of some of the comments I heard tonight of being accused of being a criminal and using children as cannon fodder. I personally found that to be a little troubling because I do think, even though I may have disagreements with some of my board members, we each put students first. We each believe in the mission of our school district. We each believe that every student should have the opportunity to reach their fullest potential, and that kind of conversation and rhetoric doesn't help us to get across the finish line together. It doesn't help us work in a collaborative and cooperative way. So I'm asking that we lower that temperature because it's not going to help us negotiate these really tricky issues as we go forward. We are in an underfunded system. Many of you may not know I've spent almost my entire professional career fighting for additional funding for students, and I will continue that fight, and I hope to continue it together with all of you in a collaborative way and not in a way that divides us. So thank you for coming and for sharing it, but I hope that we can start to work from a common set of facts and understanding instead of from misunderstandings and misstated facts. Thank you. Go ahead.
And I also have been fortunate enough to go to a couple of graduations so far. Went to Monarch graduation, which is where both of my daughters went. And at Monarch's graduation, there was a first in the state of Colorado, and it was actually on Donna's side of the stage where a service dog graduated from high school. And he had a cap and a gown on. And it was just really wonderful to see it. And I was at Broomfield High's graduation as well. And one of the things that impressed me about that is that they have a tradition of giving roses to the families for their support. So I thought that was a really special touch. And I'm looking forward to being at Boulder Prep and at Summit.
Shelley?
Yeah, I'd just like to say in response to your comments, Kathy, and I do appreciate them, that I think that the board created the kind of anxiety that we're seeing here tonight and that we're getting in message through these emails, and that I don't think it's quite fair to chastise people for responding to the anxiety that we created.
And I guess all I'd say is that I hope we could have a conversation in a respectful and non-kind of hysterical way that I've seen it. And I understand that there's misunderstandings out there, but the best way to correct those is to have conversation. And I've offered to have conversations and haven't been taken up on those. So anyway, otherwise we'll move on to information. So the next thing on the agenda is legislative update, but the legislature, thankfully, in my opinion, is in recess right now. So we don't have much to add. You'll probably be hearing that there's lots of bill signings going on, but there's really nothing to report right now that I know of. Anybody have anything on legislative update? So we'll move on to the next item, which is an ELD program update. Cindy, I'm handing it over to you.
Thank you. Here comes Kristen Nelson-Steinhoff, who is going to be talking about the ELD program in Boulder Valley. And what I can tell you is that we have an outstanding staff and outstanding teachers, and Kristen will be able to fill us in on what the expectations are for the program. Kristen.
Thank you. Good evening, Vice President Gephardt, esteemed board, and Dr. Stevenson. Thank you for having me here this evening. I began my role as the Director of Language Development this past July, and am very excited to be here this evening to share one of the many projects that we've engaged in since July. We worked over several months with a team of about 40 educators, staff and students, around a process to develop priorities and then an action plan for our work serving emerging bilinguals in BVSD. And so I've provided you with a hard copy of a plan, a summary of the plan. There is a much larger, more detailed piece that that accompanies this, but really meant for helping direct my folks and our work. And then I also have electronically some slides to share with you, and also the pamphlet electronically. So at the end of a pretty lengthy process, we really came out with 4 themes for our work with emerging bilinguals here in BVSD. The first one being a bilingual pathway. The second being developing culturally responsive practices. The third being developing leadership. And the last being using research-based strategies and practices. In terms of the bilingual pathway, that really, in general, is developing a coherent pre-K-12 system for bilingual learning, which will allow us to expand our seal of biliteracy. As you hopefully have read lately in the newspaper and in other places, we offered nearly 300 graduating seniors the seal of biliteracy this past spring, which means that they reached the highest levels in 2 languages, and so we're very excited about that. We also are working, the Language Development Department working to support our BVSD equity work through that culturally responsive practices. We're also collaborating with organizations across Boulder to empower our teachers to engage in best practices with our students. When we talk about developing leadership, we're talking about developing leadership in not only our emerging bilingual students, but in their families, and also our ELD teachers across our system, and really how are they the advocates for students and for best practices inside their schools. And then finally, in terms of research-based best practices, our language development team will be supporting the literacy adoption process by overlaying a language lens into that work and piloting other promising practices. So really we started with a purpose, and why did we want to engage in this process? The purpose that I gave to the 40 members that joined me in the work was that we would create an action step and a clear trajectory that led to a systemic approach for our work with emerging bilinguals, one that we didn't necessarily have previously. And why is that we haven't had that previously? A couple of things. We've had pretty significant turnover in department leadership over the past several years, but really hoping to move towards identifying and the systemic barriers that impede the equity and create actionable steps to overcome those. We also hope to, we are concerned about the achievement gap and the opportunity gap that exists not only in our state but here in BVSD, and that the one here in BVSD has persisted over time. We have had other concerns as well, but are really looking forward to engaging in the work. So our process, what did we do? We identified stakeholders. We identified classroom teachers, ELD teachers, teachers on our TOSAs. We identified and invited building level and district level administrators. I personally met with a group of about 10 emerging bilinguals at Boulder High School who helped to create a presentation to share with the adults in our system the things that had worked really well in ELD for them over their years in our district and the things that hadn't worked very well. And so you'll see in that pamphlet, those are actual Boulder High School students that did an amazing job presenting to our staff on our second day together, really to focus and make sure that we were focusing all of our conversations around our work on our students. We then engaged in 4 full-day brainstorming and work sessions. Day 1, we reviewed our data and our current reality and really pushed our participants to maintain an asset-based lens and engage in asset-based discourse, which really, I think, allowed us to proceed in a really positive way. Our second day together, we dug into programming across our district. We discussed bilingual programming. We discussed secondary ELD programming. We discussed our programming for newcomers. We discussed co-teaching. We're piloting it at 3 elementary schools this year. And also the issue that we have in our district and that some of our schools are non-program schools, meaning we do not serve emerging bilinguals at those schools, and what could be done about that. The third day, we reviewed the roles of educators and if we were to define roles, and the 40 stakeholders defined what a language director would do. It was a little bit vulnerable, but also really positive that they could tell me what they wanted me to do. And then we did the same for all of teachers, administrators, building administrators, teachers on special assignment, et cetera, in relation to serving emerging bilinguals, and then talked about if we have expectations of these folks, what kind of professional development and professional learning do we need to be giving to teachers and building leaders. And then our final day, we really dug in a little bit deeper to the issues of equity in terms of poverty and MTSS, and really dug into the collaborative drafting of the plan. so that you have before you. So I just wanted to let you know that that's what we've been up to this year, and really looking forward to putting it to work moving into next year.
Board members, do you have any questions or comments?
Yeah, thank you for the presentation, for all the work that you and your team have put in. I'm just looking at the point number 4 on the development of bilingual pathways, the removal of systemic barriers that prohibit equitable access to schools that support home language development. And you list as those couple of those barriers, transportation and enrollment procedures. Could you say a little more about those?
Certainly. So obviously continuing to think about how do we help support families that struggle with transportation. For example, another action plan item is to increase our bilingual offerings at the middle and the high school level. Currently, this year we did add a bilingual program at Manhattan Middle School, but unfortunately we don't have transportation for students from our bilingual schools to that middle school, or to Casey for that matter, and really looking at how that impacts students' ability to get there. And so doing some more investigative work around that. In terms of the other piece around the registration and the getting students signed up for school, it's also looking at our role in the newcomer work, in open enrollment, and in completing the online registration process for students, and how are we as a language development department supporting that as well.
I see. So it's like the mechanics of enrolling.
The mechanics, yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Oops. Donna?
I just have a quick question. You said that you don't serve some schools with emerging bilinguals.
Yeah.
Tell me more.
So we have about 9 schools total. We have 1 middle school and about 8 elementaries that are considered to be non-program schools. And those schools do not receive support in terms of an English language development teacher in those schools. And those families, if they would like services, they then are transported to a program school. What we're then asking families to do is leave a neighborhood school because of a program. And so one of the things that we really hope to do is look at, through our budgeting process and through our allocation of FTE, how we can really support all schools to become program schools.
Okay. Thanks.
Kitty?
Could you just explain to me the difference between bilingualism and biliteracy?
Certainly. So bilingualism and biliteracy really, in essence, are the same thing. Biliteracy, I mean, they both are around speaking, listening, reading, and writing. When we think about program schools, so we have bilingual program schools where students are learning to do all of those things in 2 languages. We then have students that later on in their educational career will engage in biliterate activities in the form of world language classes, and will be introduced to speaking, listening, reading, and writing. But in essence, the terms are pretty similar. In our programming, however, one sort of refers to that pathway that starts in preschool, and we hope to move up into 12th grade, the other being more of that world language model that starts in our middle and our high schools.
So then, do students have to do something to demonstrate biliteracy? You know, I noticed at Monarch there were a lot of kids with that seal, and I was impressed.
With the green cord, absolutely, the green cord. So it was a state law that was passed last spring, and students have to demonstrate a high level of proficiency in English, and so it was a passing score on the SAT. It is a 3.0 in all of their English language arts courses, and it is an AP or passing an AP test, so several things. And then in an additional language, they have to have taken, in our district, 5 years of programming. received a 3.0 in that programming, and students can also replace the 5 years of programming with an AP or an IB assessment. So yes, reaching those high levels of language.
So are there, other than Spanish, do we have?
Oh, certainly.
What languages do we have?
So we have.
That kids are literal in?
Certainly. So we
Literate,
have.
not
Yep,
literal.
Yep. So we gave out seals this year for Spanish, French, German. I'm trying to think. We do have some students that their IB assessment is pending in our Latin program, and so we hope to award it as well to our Latin students here in BVSD.
Any other comments, board members? I have a quick question.
Yes.
I also noticed the green cords. That was awesome.
Good.
And I
It was
think
fun
you
to see
said
them on Facebook. I saw lots of them on Facebook.
250 graduates?
So we had, so if all of those that are pending, that we're waiting on IB or AP scores, all of those happen, we will have 330 total.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So I just have a quick question, because I noticed in the report you gave to us that you say the Ed Northwest report, which I've read and had numerous areas of concern and areas for improvement, but we're not addressing this data? Are we encompassing it some other way? Because when I read those,
yeah.
can you just explain that to me?
Sure. So a couple of the key findings were really about instructional best practices. So when I think about that fourth theme that is about research best practices, really a lot of what was addressed in the Ed Northwest report around the disconnect between ELD classes and general classroom, the content language objectives inconsistent. Those were some of the reports that came out. And so really thinking about instructional best practices was a theme inside the Ed Northwest report, in addition to the piece around program versus non-program schools was another issue that we did address through this process.
So how are we going to be looking at measuring how these new practices are improving our
Absolutely.
instruction?
So we have a combination of both benchmarks, so sort of some soft celebrations around these things will be in place by these dates. So many of these action steps have, in that larger document that I shared, have specific by this date this will happen. In addition to really looking at our baseline data and what then are we expecting. Obviously, there are things that we'd like to see a decrease in our long-term emerging bilinguals here in our system. We would like to see a decrease in the disproportionality of our students in special ed who are emerging bilinguals. We would like to see an increase in graduation rates. We'd like to see an increase in students participating in advanced coursework. Those kind of measures, collecting both the baseline and then where are we headed, is also a part of the plan.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else? Thank you so much for your presentation and your answers to your questions. Thank you. So our final information item for the night is the sustainability report. Cindy?
I want to thank Gita, Carol, and Jeff Medwitz tonight. They're going to talk about the work that Boulder Valley School District is doing on sustainability. And I will tell you that I've gotten to listen to them. I got to listen to them at our bond committee meeting, and they do quite a presentation. So, Gita and Jeff, are you ready? You're on.
All right, so the district created its first sustainability plan in 2009 with updates in 2012 and 2015. And the sustainability plan covers 4 main areas, each of which has 5-year goals and strategies in those areas. So that's buildings, which is construction and operations, materials, which looks at purchasing all the way to waste diversion efforts, transportation, which is how our students and staff are getting to and from our schools, and education, which includes our work with green teams at the schools and how we communicate about these efforts. And in these 4 areas, we have overarching themes of climate and health. We created a sustainable energy plan in 2013 to do a deeper dive into planning for energy conservation, management, and efficiency. And all these plans helped inform our Building for Success and bond and construction program and are supported by Board of Education Policy, ECF. So that's as much stalling as I can do in the introduction until we get this up and I can hand it over to Jeff. Do you want me to try to pull it up while you get going? Okay. All right.
Good evening. So I'm Jeff Medwitz. I'm the project manager of Energy Systems. But before I can discuss some of our successes we've made with energy, I have to define some terms for you by which the metric that we determine success. Energy use intensity, or EUI, is a term I kind of liken to the MPG for buildings. It's basically the annual energy that we use divided by the building square footage. And the lower that number, the more efficient the building. And I'd like to remind the board of some of our goals of this energy plan that Gita described. Our 2019 short-term goal is to reduce our 2008 baseline by 20%, and that would be by the end of fiscal year 2019. And then we have an aggressive long-term goal that challenges us to become a zero net energy capable school district by 2050. And zero net energy capable means that our EUIs, again, that kind of MPG for buildings, is low enough so that we can add renewables such as solar to offset the energy that we're using off the grid. And generally, an EUI of 30 or less is considered zero net energy capable. And so that is the goal for 2050, is to bring that down. And just as some comparison, right now our district average is just over 60, so it is quite an aggressive goal. But from an energy perspective, the bond, I could say, has one of 3 types of projects. The first type of energy project are called renovations that feature retro commissioning. And in these types of projects, mechanical systems are replaced, but not all of them. And so those that are not replaced, that remain, are being tuned up so that the entire building is running as efficiently as possible. Of 9 projects that we've completed thus far of this type, we added air conditioning to 5, but yet all of those buildings reduced their EUIs by an average of 15%. So that's really exciting work. So that's the first type of project. The second is deep energy retrofit. And scopes for these projects reach a magnitude where we're able to really take a deep dive into energy efficiency. To date, our deep energy retrofits are on target to reduce their energy use by 34%. And then finally, the third type of project are zero net energy capable projects. We have an EUI goal of 25. And for those projects right now, right on your screen, we're on target to be 64% more efficient than the baseline. So results, the business not as usual approach to our energy efficient design in the bond has produced impressive results. All projects, every single one thus far, has reduced their energy use. And comparing pre-bond to last fiscal year, we've reduced our portfolio-wide EUI by about 10 points, and that's pretty significant. And we're on track to meet that 2019 goal of 20% less than our 2008 baseline. So why is this important? Well, the second biggest expenditure in the district, second only to salaries, is utilities. And our utility budget is $6.9 million. That's a lot of money that we're paying. And utility rates are not going to go down. We're seeing yearly increases. So the monies that we save or avoid can go to the classroom. And the graph in front of you is a real-world snapshot of those 16 projects that are listed of our energy spend compared from 2014, 2015 through this past year. Even though that we've gone through 3 years of rate hikes and inflation, through the work of the bond for those projects, we've reduced our energy spend by about 8%, and that equates to about $120,000.
All right. Get caught up here. Okay. So in addition to energy, we have been encouraging through the bond water reduction measures where relevant. So this includes a switch to more efficient fixtures, outdoor landscaping, and synthetic fields. So what the data here shows is that in the bond schools to date, we've seen about a 9% reduction in water in those schools, which is about a $30,000 annual savings. So pretty great results there. Also, water and landscaping related, we're looking into options for best sustainable landscaping practices, which will reduce pesticide and water use, decrease weeds while maintaining healthy playing fields and outdoor spaces for our kids. BVSD has existing 29 sites, 29 schools with solar panels. We recently put out an RFP for a power purchase agreement to install solar on our 5 new sites, so the 4 exemplar schools and then the upcoming transportation, to make them as close to net zero as possible. And what we learned through the process is that if the district has money to put down up front, it would lead to the best economic benefit for BVSD in the long term. So for example, if we're able to find roughly $2 million to purchase panels, we would see about a $3 million savings over the life of those panels, versus a PPA option, which might cost the district money over the life. So we hope to come back to the board next year with a proposal on this topic. Our waste diversion target for bond construction is 75%. So this means diverting waste from the landfill through repurposing and recycling those materials. So currently our bond projects have an average of about 60%, ranging anywhere from 17 all the way up to 98%, which is awesome. We've also added newer waste diversion stations in some of our schools, which you can see in the upper right-hand corner, and recycling containers for our playgrounds and fields. And these help with our schools' ongoing waste reduction efforts. All right, so I'm going to switch gears and talk about our non-bond related projects and our work to engage our school communities in this in sustainability. So the Shared Savings Program encourages change in occupant behavior. The program helps schools track energy use, helps modify occupant behavior towards efficiency, and allows schools to earn a reward for their electricity bill savings. This year we have 16 schools participating in the program. So with principal support, these schools agreed to form a green team, audit their school for energy use, take some follow-up action, and then educate their school community about it. The competition lasts from October through the end of June to capture savings over breaks and summers, and so we'll announce winners for this year next fall. But the current champion is Heatherwood Elementary School, so in addition to winning money, they have our traveling trophy, which is, I know why they're all really into it. This is the snapshot, this how to get to our building dashboard, which is how we track energy data, live energy data, which we have for most of our schools. So you can go to the home page and click on the energy icon, and it'll get you to the BVSD Energy Dashboard. So this arrow is pointing to those schools in the Shared Savings Program, but again, most of our schools are on this dashboard where you can see live energy data and compare them to other schools and how they're doing over time. So this is what we use. We track and compare non-weather normalized data from this year to the previous year to determine those savings for the schools in the Shared Energy Savings Program. Zero waste is another one of our focus. So all BVSD schools have recycling at their schools, and 37 of our schools now have school-wide composting as part of our Green Star program and partnership with EcoCycle. So EcoCycle provides ongoing support and environmental education as part of our contract with them. Some of the highlights of this year's partnership include 40,000 plus BVSD students and staff participating in over 1,200 assemblies, classroom presentations, field trips, and more. We have an annual waste-free lunch contest. So we had several schools compete for prizes to make the least lunchtime trash. So this year, Eisenhower Elementary won. They reduced lunchtime waste by 82%. And they also returned a surplus of 51% of the reusable forks to the kitchen, which makes food services happy. Another program is the reusables rule at our school, and this is where we've been putting in those automatic water bottle fillers through grant partnership with the City of Boulder, EcoCycle, and in Rotary. So this year we were able to install fillers at Flatirons and Elementary and Horizons K-8 through this particular program and provide water education at those schools, plus Douglas and Manhattan Middle. And we're right in the thick of Locker Leftovers project, where we're working with secondary students to reduce waste through recycling and composting and charity through all that stuff coming out of their lockers. And our two new green schools for this year are Alicia Sanchez and Arapahoe High. We add about 2 or 3 schools per year to that program. Oop, and did I skip right over those pictures? There's our zero waste you saw. Oh, and on the right is a senior recycling his gown. So some of our schools have disposable gowns, so we've set up a program where we take them and then we give them to students the next year at those schools who might need help buying a gown, just to make sure that we're not just throwing them away right after graduation. And I heard you mentioning the green cords. CU actually does the same program, and students who sign up to do this wear the green cords, so it means something different at CU. Just okay, for sustainable transportation, to date, we've been able to install electric vehicle charging stations, like you see on the left, at 22 schools, and we're able to do this with grant money. We've gotten $1,081 of grant funding to help offset the cost for the project through the Regional Air Quality Council. We also have a really popular trip tracker program that you may have heard of. We've got 22 schools participating in that and about 5,000 students. And this year, those students walked or biked 176,924 miles. I did better with that number, but anyway, that's a lot of walking and biking. So the school rewards them. They report their miles each month, and then they get trip tracker dollars that they can use at local venues. So we support green teams throughout the district, working on class projects, gardens, the Shared Energy Savings Program, and a lot more. One of the things we're excited about that we're working on this year is creating a green report card, so that we're going to be able to highlight the efforts that are going on at each of the schools, and we're going to also create, have on there for each school their waste diversion number, their EUI, and water use, and then other green features that we may be able to integrate through the bond. So collaborations and partnerships are key parts in making our occupant engagement program successful. We partner regularly with more than 20 plus environmental educator groups in the community, and we partner with CU, Boulder County, many of the local cities, and St. Vrain District, and much more. One highlight from this year is in the fall, we had roughly 100 students go to CU for their Climate and Sports Student Summit, and it was just an awesome day of playing games and doing trash on your back relays and how low can you go energy games, and the students had a great time, and it was a great partnership with CU. So leadership is part of our sustainability vision, and this year BVSD has been invited to serve on the National Green Schools Leadership Advisory Board, serve as a reviewer for the USGBC National Conference. We sit on the advisory committee for the National Green Schools Conference and also presented. And we wrote at the beginning of the year an article for the Green Schools Quarterly, which is the first national online publication for this type of work. And because of that article, actually, just a couple weeks ago, we had some visitors from Denmark who came to learn more about our sustainability programs. So that is what we have for today. Thank you very much for your time, and we'll take any questions.
Board members, comments or questions? Kitty?
I have a question about the charging stations. So how exactly do they work? Do we charge people? Do they put a credit card in, or can anybody just, because I know out here, you can just plug your car in.
Yeah, at the moment, you could just plug your car in, but we're far enough along now, we're actually starting this summer, we're gonna be charging people for off hours. We wanna keep it free during the day just to support sustainable transportation to and from the schools by staff and parents, but then after hours, there will be a small fee.
Okay.
Yeah.
Donna?
I just have a comment. Everybody loves saving money, and I loved your presentation. It reminded me, my son closed on a house in the area about a week ago, and the 93-year-old woman obviously was concerned about saving money and sustainability, because inside all the toilets there were baby white containers filled with sand and styrofoam in the windows. I'm glad we've progressed past that.
Should I write that down for maintenance as an idea? Yeah.
Sam?
I appreciate all your work in the report. I look forward to them because I know we're going to continue to make progress. And I really appreciate the educational component you incorporate as well. I do like saving the money and the energy too, but teaching our kids to be good stewards of the planet and how to create a sustainable future for this, this community and the world is obviously super important to all of us. So I'm so glad to hear that your work is incorporated into what the students are learning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Shelley? Nothing? Anybody else? I just want to echo what my fellow board members have said. This is awesome, and thank you for your good work in including students and staff and the community to the extent that they can understand what we're doing and learn from all of your hard work that you're doing. So thank you very much.
Thanks.
Can we do consent first? So board members, can I just take a temperature check here? I was thinking we would go through consent and then take a break. Is that all right with all of you? Okay. The next item on the agenda is action items in the consent grouping, and I'll read them. 7.1, personnel items. 7.2, approval of minutes, May 8, 2018, special meeting. Approval of minutes, May 8, 2018, regular meeting. Approval of minutes, May 15, 2018, special meeting. 7.5, approval of revised board policy IFF, schools of choice. 7.6, change order to the general contractor contract for bond-funded improvement work at Broomfield High School. 7.7, closeout to the construction manager general contractor contract for bond-funded improvement work at the Whittier Elementary School renovation. 7.8, non-renewal of contracts. 7.9, resolution 1816 to authorize a resolution to accept bids and authorize construction and maintenance projects during July 2018. 710, grant instructional services and equity, Title VII, American Indian Education, U.S. Department of Education, 18. Are there any items board members would like to pull from the consent grouping? Hearing none, before we begin a discussion, we need a motion to approve the consent agenda. Sam, so moved. Is there a second? Kitty seconds. Board members, are there any discussions of any items on the consent agenda? Hearing none, Chris, can we take the vote, please?
Benford? Fuqua?
Yes.
Gebhardt?
Yes.
Myers? Yes. Sargent?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Take a 5-minute comfort break and we'll come back. We don't have any action items on the agenda, so we'll move into our study items. lost Bill. We lost Bill. We lost Bill. Oh, there he is. Bill. Okay. Gonna call the meeting back to order, please. Moving on to study items, we have study item 9.1, I can read, which is the 2018-19 proposed budget. Mr. Sutter, our CFO, I think is queued up and ready to go. Cindy, do you have anything you need to say before we start?
We're just so excited to see Bill up here tonight. So, Bill, you're on.
All right, so I updated the presentation to include 37 more slides. No, I didn't do that. It was the same presentation that was attached to the agenda item. So, first off, a quick review of the adopted budget priorities for the development of the 2018-19 budget. So 3 major categories with some subheadings under that: support to close the opportunity and achievement gaps, equity, support and differentiated funding for subpopulations, social emotional learning and supports counselors, investment in literacy instruction and interventions, investment in special education services, investment in English language development, program evaluation and effectiveness, transparency and progress reporting, local common assessments, and other programs for students. Area 2, attracting, recruiting, and retaining high-quality staff. And number 3, maintaining and ensuring adequate district operational functions, particularly around school facilities, safety, and security. So under these, we have included the items that are incorporated into the proposed budget within each of those areas. So around the area of equity, we have included a weighted student funding formula in the reset of the 2.25% cuts. So that's both for the school resource allocation and elementary paraeducators. So this addresses some of the concerns around funding that's available for schools that don't have as many access to resources from their parent community, perhaps. So again, a weighted student formula in both of those areas. Social emotional learning and supports, so we did roll out phase 2 of the elementary counselor program. Literacy instruction and intervention, we have the Wilson interventions with students on IEPs and supports for students with dyslexia. Investment in special education services, so we have 2 additional autism classrooms. Within English language development, so there is continued the continuation of the current investment in ELD programming. There was not a specific budget request. If you'll remember back when we reviewed those specific budget requests, there was not a specific one for ELD programming at that time. Program evaluation and effectiveness, VisLab expansion, that's our data warehouse tools, standards and curriculum revision, intervention structures and tools for mathematics, in transparency and progress reporting, the local common assessments. So we do have the continued development of local common assessments and the VisLab expansion. That's sort of duplicative, but that's the data warehouse tools. Other programs for students. So we have the preschool classroom expansion. That's 1 additional classroom at El Dorado K-8 and additional classroom staff for student growth. Although the student growth is projected to be very small next year, we did include a little bit extra for that. And then we have the staffing reserve to meet the needs of students as we move into the fall. For attracting, recruiting, and retaining high-quality staff, we have the 3.4% cost of living adjustment. That's in line with the 2017 CPI, Consumer Price Index, which is the inflation rate applied to the School Finance Act. We have a 5% dental and health insurance premium increase, salary schedule movement and attrition savings there, as well as the second half of the 2018 para rate increase that impact. For maintaining and ensuring adequate district operational functions, we have maintenance materials, work order system and capital equipment inventory, an IT security audit, additional high school campus monitors, supervision and training, and digital communications revisioning. So next, I will go into the detail, a little bit of detail of the numbers. and what has changed since the preliminary budget when we went through that. So we have a slight reduction in the available one-time resources in the beginning fund balance. The reserves carry forward is unchanged, reoccurring revenue is unchanged, and non-reoccurring revenue is unchanged. So that's a slight decrease in total resources available for use. To look at specifically a couple of these areas, so in that slightly less beginning fund balance, so that was a reserve adjustment on the one-time resources. When we looked at that back with the preliminary budget, we included that net of reserves. As we got into the third quarter and things started to shake out, that was a little bit less. And then on the ongoing revenue, this does include the BS factor, the budget stabilization factor, or formerly known as the negative factor, buy down, so that was passed in the legislature. On the expenditure side, so personnel, so there's a change from a preliminary. If you remember, we were a bit short overall in the budget, so this is a reduction of the expenses from that, so that brings that back in line with available resources. Other expenditures, so that remained the same, and then in one-time expenditures, these are the non-recurring position and other expenditures, and a little bit more detail here. So the changes related to that 1.6 million reduction, the final para legislation removed the, we call it the net to gross calculation, which is has to do with deductions for pre-tax savings plans. That came out of the legislation. It will be implemented on new employees to para in 2020, so it's a little ways away. And because it's only new employees, it's a very small impact to the district. And then on, and then staffing detail alignment, again with $280 million worth of personnel, that's overtime and subs and positions and hourly and salaried. As you go through the detail and shake all that out, that made that last little bit of adjustment. On one-time expenditures, we have an increase in the staffing reserve, and then multi-year expenditures that we discussed in the preliminary budget, we have moved those out of the expenditure line and put them into a reserve line to sort of hold them for the future year expenditures. Transfers, reserves, and ending balance. So no change in reoccurring transfers, no change in non-reoccurring transfers. The Tabor and contingency and gap reserves reduced a little bit. And then the total ending balance improved. Again, if you remember, we had a shortfall to begin with, so now we're in a positive position, which is required. So again, a little more detail as all the expenditures shake out and the final amount for the Tabor, the 3% Tabor and 3% contingency, and then those multi-year reserves getting rolled in to that reserve line. That accounts for those changes there. And then again, with the change in expenditures and the ending balance going from negative to zero, we have the para and the budget detail alignment coming up. So, 3 adjustments that were discussed at last Tuesday's work session. So they were not built into the budget because we were done with it at that point in time, working on the detail. So these are 3 things that would be brought forward for adoption when the final budget is brought forward for adoption. IT security staff, additional FTE, classroom management software, and professional development related to that classroom management software. So the Operations and Technology Fund, when we last spoke about the preliminary budget, we had not included an increase in the mill levy associated with that. We have ongoing resources available within the Operations and Technology Fund. That was a way to address any negative impacts, significant negative impacts that could have come out of the para legislation if that had been implemented as was originally proposed. So there are resources available in there, which is how we would address those 3 items I just mentioned. Those resources can be spent, they can be saved, they can be discussed at a future meeting. We have the revised budget process to go through. So next steps, again, bringing forward the budget for adoption at the June 12th meeting. That would include those 3 budget adjustments. Then in September, we'll have our year-end balances, carryover items, one-time resources available. Then in November, we have our October count finalized, so it does take about a month to finalize the October count. In December, we have the certification of mill levies. That's when the final decision would be made around potentially increasing the operational mill levy up to 1 mill, additional mill. Those resources could be accessed, they could be held in reserve for critical capital needs that are not addressed in the bond program. It could be set aside to address depreciation type expenses, so kind of hedging our bets against future bond programs, or certainly new expenses. Those solar panels, as mentioned, were one of the multitude of options that are out there. And then, of course, in January is the deadline for the revised budget adoption. The end.
Thanks, Bill. Sam?
Really quick, I should know this, but what is our share of the negative factor buy down? So,
How much that we got is about $5 million.
5 million, okay. Also, just another kudo to the benefits staff and the district for holding the health insurance premium increase to 5%. I think that's worth noting, given the crazy increases that most everybody else is
Double-digit increases
Yeah.
for a lot of places,
Anyone else? Questions, comments on the proposed budget? Shelley?
So, I remember last year when we were talking about, there's $100,000 in here for dyslexia, right, supports. Can you say more about what those supports are and who they're gonna reach?
I cannot specifically, but I bet Dr. Messier could.
Dr. Messier?
Thank you. So we see those being spent on 2 different things. One on the Orton Gillingham Point Teacher Program, where we haven't quite decided at this point how much we're expanding it next year, because we're waiting to see the results of a study that we've been doing on evaluating the effectiveness of that program. So that would be one area where we would be potentially spending those funds. The other would be in supporting the administration of a diagnostic assessment related to helping teachers identify appropriate interventions for students who might have dyslexia.
So that's fairly inexpensive, right?
Well, in this case, it would actually be some FTE to support administration and analysis of that diagnostic assessment.
And you're not talking about a universal screener,
Correct.
are you?
Correct. We're not talking about a universal
So what
screener
would
at
it
this time.
look like then?
So the diagnostic assessment would be used after the universal screeners that we already administer at kindergarten, if those indicated that the student had some potential weaknesses in the areas of phonics and phonological awareness, then this diagnostic would be used as a follow-up assessment to that. Also, at our schools where we're implementing the Orton Gillingham Point Teacher Program, a teacher would be able to use that diagnostic at their discretion if they believed that there was a student who needed additional assessment, and parents would be able to request that diagnostic assessment for their child if they feel like there might be an issue.
So if a child failed the first set of assessments or showed some sort of deficiency, would it be required that they would use a dyslexia screener?
If there was a significant deficiency in the areas of phonics and phonological awareness, then the teachers would be advised to use that diagnostic.
So then what are you using to determine that? Because if it's still iReady, then that's been shown not to be able to do that. So is there something new in the quiver that would identify that?
So at this time, we're still using iReady and iStation because those are the assessments that are approved by the READ Act requirements.
So-
We are also using school readiness assessment, which at this time is TS Gold, but which we may be changing depending on how the continued implementation of TS Gold goes at the state level. We'll also be implementing at kindergarten, because we've purchased the Wilson Foundations program. So, of course, that's a very in-depth phonics program at the kindergarten level. And so with each unit, there are unit tests that go with that assess students' skills in the areas of phonics with pretty significant depth. So teachers will be required to give those unit tests, and then we hope that that combination of all three of those things will give us enough indication of how students are doing with regards to phonics and phonological awareness. So yes, new arrow in the quiver are the Wilson Foundations unit tests.
But they're not screeners, so you wouldn't know right off.
You wouldn't know right at the beginning of the year.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so, since we have money to do that, what would be the reason for not doing it?
Well, the reason for not doing it would be that we don't believe that an additional universal screener would actually add information that would be helpful.
Even though we know that iReady doesn't screen for dyslexia.
If we were only using iReady by itself, I think that we might want to ask ourselves our question about whether an additional screener would be necessary. But given that it's on top of the school readiness assessment and the Wilson Foundation's unit tests, we feel like the combination of those three things is worth giving a shot before we think about adding a universal screener.
So let's say a kid gets picked up later in the process using, what screener did we decide on for dyslexia?
The diagnostic one that we're going to be using one called Core Phonics
Okay,
as a diagnostic.
All right, so let's say a kid gets caught with that and we see that they have an issue. Are all of our literacy interventionists trained in OG so that if that child's at a school with a literacy interventionist, somebody there is able to help them?
Yeah, so we are still in the process of getting all of our literacy interventionists cross-trained in Orton-Gillingham, but that is a goal of ours over the next couple of years to get all of our interventionists cross-trained in that.
So it doesn't sound like that is money that's in the budget, though, for this year.
No, we are working, however, on a grant proposal in cooperation with BV Kid to the Zarlingo Foundation to help fund additional Orton-Gillingham training for our interventionists and teachers. And I will say that that assessment plan that we've brought forward with the diagnostic came out of our dyslexia advisory team, which is a collaborative team of parents as well as teachers and practitioners.
So if our goal is to train more interventionists in Orton-Gillingham, and we have money, right now we have one-time money and we have ongoing money, is there some reason we wouldn't start that right now, because we've been talking about this for years?
There's a pretty significant capacity issue as well in terms of time that we have available for our staff to engage in professional learning. So next year, with the rollout of Wilson Foundations at kindergarten, as well as the rollout of the program that we're doing at first and second grade, it puts a significant strain on the professional development time that we have available for our staff. So to add professional development on top of that while we're in the midst of the implementation of a major reading program is something that I think would strain our resources.
Which major reading program are you referring to?
So the Faunus and Pinnell Classroom, as well as Wilson Foundations.
They're both new.
They're both new. They're both new. So that's a pretty heavy professional development lift for the school district, and it's a huge implementation lift for the educational leaders at our schools and the teachers at our schools and the interventionists who will be learning these new materials alongside those teachers.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the only other point I'd like to have the board maybe consider is that, you know, we're getting a lot of feedback from our parents that they're concerned with the lack of web filtering on our Chromebooks. And I know Andrew's saying that he's pressed for funds to be able to do that. And I'd just like to point out that the funds are available to us, and that if Andrew could identify, along with DTAC and parent community, the proper level and type of web filtering, that I think that we might want to include that as an additional budget adjustment. So I would really very much appreciate if we could talk about that. Maybe I'll suggest that at agenda setting, and maybe we could find out more about what that would cost before we approve this budget.
Of course, Donna, go ahead.
Sam,
Sorry, Shelley, were you done? Okay.
I wanted to ask while you were up here before you went back. You don't have to come up, but did anybody? I saw the email that came through about is it the Orton Gillingham Teacher Scholarship?
Yes.
Did we get a response?
We did push that out to all of our teachers, and I don't know. I would have to follow up on it.
Okay.
So one little comment on the timing of things. So certainly the adoption of the budget to begin moving forward would not hold up discussions and a decision around funding some sort of web filtering thing down the road. So it doesn't need to happen prior to the adoption of the budget. I mean, I think there's lots of conversations that would happen, need to happen.
You're saying because it could be done by January or whatever?
I don't know how long it would actually take, but it doesn't, certainly
I mean, at any
not.
point between now and January, you could do that, is what you're saying.
He's saying a version of that.
Yeah, I mean, basically any time during the year, as long as we have resources available, then it's always the opportunity to allocate those dollars and spend them.
Any other? I just have a question about the web filtering. Shelley, do you see that as one time or ongoing? It seems like to me like it'd be maybe a little bit upfront, but then ongoing.
I don't know, we'd have to ask Andrew.
Yeah, it's an ongoing thing in all the conversations I've heard.
Yeah, I want to make a clarification. So there was not a request for web filtering because I don't believe there's another device we could buy that would help with web filtering. There are different types of devices, but we're already using one of the top ones in the industry, and so it would just be swapping it out. It may block some other things that aren't blocked today, but it would probably let some other things through that are blocked today. So that was, when we went through the details, additional web blocking filtering was not an ask or a request or anything that I think I could do to block more. There's an RFI out right now with regard to how much inappropriate content is coming through. That's the challenge. If we knew the inappropriate content, we could filter it. And so I'll have more details in that RFI. You should get it by the end of this week. If we want to go deeper, it's probably another study item.
I think it's a lot of conversations. I really do. I mean, this whole thing is just escalating. There are now 400 people on that Facebook group, who are very, very concerned about this. And I'm not sure what the right response is, but I think we need to do more than we're doing. And certainly web filtering is something that we've heard about over and over again. So if Palo Alto is the right tool, then why isn't it doing the filtering job that we want? Is it the way we're setting it to do it?
No, and any web filter will have the same problem. Web filters, all of them either over-filter in some categories or under-filter in others. And that's just due to the dynamic nature of the internet. I will point out, and this will be in the RFI as well, you have to go searching for these things. You have to purposely go out. And that's in violation of policy JS. I'll point that out as well. If you want to find things that are inappropriate, you will be able to do that regardless of the filter. It is the nature.
I don't know what you mean by purposely. I mean, my kids have inadvertently found things on school computers, so.
And those are the cases where we're hopeful that people will report them to us, and then we can block the specific URL. That is what the information we really need.
I'm wondering if there's a different way to deal with some of these questions rather than the end of a board meeting when it's just a back and forth. So I'd like to talk to Tina and find out how we might deal with some of the questions in a different way.
Well, I'm gonna
whether
put it
it's
on
a
agenda
study
setting.
session or whether it's so that we can get your questions answered. But I don't think we're going to do much just back and forth right now.
Well, I was just trying to figure out if we needed to allocate any more money for that in terms of
And
the
that's a
budget.
fair question.
Yeah, so I'll put it on agenda setting.
I was going to say, maybe we could bring it up at agenda setting.
Yeah.
Board members, anything else for Bill or on this topic, this study item? Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Sutter. Are we bringing this back then for approval on June 12th? Okay, that's the current status, is bringing this back for final approval on June 12th. All right, our next study item is 9.2, House Bill 17-1375, plan relating to the distribution of local mill levy override revenue. I think, Cindy, we have Melissa, is that right? Yes, please.
So the board had a work session, and we went through a proposed resolution. We've had multiple conversations with different financial scenarios. So what's in front of the board tonight for study is a revised version of the resolution. And so where we left off with the work session was a plan that carved out from the mill levy revenue a portion of the mill levy dollars to pay for the district-wide ELD, English Language Development Program, with all the remainder of the mill levy money being distributed at the 95% rate. And so since that time, we have been in discussions with the charter schools around the contract issues. We have contracts with each of our 5 charter schools that expire on different dates, and so how do we align that in such a way? So we're trying to figure out a way to maintain the status quo so the board can continue this conversation while at the same time getting a plan on the books by July 1 so that preserves the board's right in the future to have a plan in place. So what is presented tonight is a way to meet the letter of the law, which is having this a 95% statutory minimum, or what's been negotiated in the charter contracts, whichever's higher, in place through 2025. And then at that point, the last charter contract would have expired. By then we would have negotiated. The board might have come up with a different plan in the interim, but this plan would have whatever the plan, it would have roll into this ELD type funding of the program, the district level program, with 95% of the rate for the remainder of the mill levy monies. Does anybody have any questions about the contents of what has been presented to the board for study tonight? And then I know you all will have a discussion
Okay,
without
Shelley?
my input.
Melissa, can't we just decide how much we're going to allocate and leave out all this 25, 26 language? And I mean, why are we doing that? Why can't we just give them some certainty that this is where we are? And then if another board wants to take this up because there's some other issue that comes up in the future, then just let that happen. I feel like this is, why are we way out there, 6, 7 years out there? We're trying to decide what we're going to be doing. I don't understand why we put that in the resolution.
So the board can decide on the plan that it wants.
Yeah, so why put this in there?
So we've had a work session and numerous other conversations with the board, and this there's been an indication that this is the type of plan that the board is supportive of.
We've not had a conversation about this 20, 25, 26. This is we saw this afternoon.
Out of the last work session was a plan implementing the ELD
Right.
95% hybrid plan
Right.
immediately with the
Right.
1920 budget.
Which is not
So
this.
this is pushing that out.
Right, So, but this is the first time we've seen it, and I don't understand why we're pushing it out 6 or 7 years as if we know what we're gonna want at that point. Why don't we just write the resolution for whatever we decide the allocation's gonna be now, and leave it at that until the next board wants to change that for some
If
reason?
that's the direction of the board, we can draft
I-
it that
Well,
way.
I guess I'm just asking, why did we write it? I'm looking for the rationale for why we did this, so I can decide whether that's a good rationale or not.
The resolution that was presented at the work session, I think we ended the work session with everybody not needing further discussion on that.
No, I'm talking about
proposed plan.
this resolution. This is not what we saw at the work session.
Right.
Agreed?
I think, Shelley,
So-
are you asking specifically about the date, the 25, 26?
Yes, that's all I'm
And I think
asking about.
that's when the peak-to-peak contract
Right, I know that.
expires. And so I don't think that we have to have that date. That's the reason for that date.
Uh-huh. But you understand my concern, like a future board, we'd have no idea what they might want to do, and we're looking out now 7 years.
Right, so is your preference that we would just remove the date?
Well, all this language about anything in the future, we should just decide on the percent that we're going to allocate, and once we decide it, then leave that to the future.
Okay.
That's my opinion. I don't understand why we would do that. Can anyone think of a good reason to do that? I mean, to put that in a resolution at this point?
I would like to give the charter schools the needed information that they need now, and rather than say, we'll put all this on hold. It doesn't make sense to me, and I agree with how you're putting it. I had some questions tonight after the ELD presentation itself and how that, because from my notes that she was talking about the 9 schools that don't have it. And those 9 schools, it's FTE distribution, the water. We muddy the waters by talking about FTE and not money, and then talking about how, showing that ELD reduction to the charter schools and how that would impact them. So I'm really confused, and I think the charter schools are confused as well and need to know definitely what can we depend on.
Let me do a check. Are you all asking us to go back and come back to you with a different plan, a different presentation? Because I'm not sure what we're hearing, and I'm not sure what we would go away and do right now. And can I hold on the ELD for just a minute, and then I'll come back to that. But as far as the allocation under 1375, are you asking for a different plan?
Well, I think that for me, whether we get to 95 or 100% on it is a legitimate question.
Right,
We
okay.
should have a conversation about that. But I would have to vote no on this the
Okay.
way it's written, just because it doesn't make any sense to me.
Okay.
And
Okay.
I also just want to say, to your point, Melissa, when we were presented with this 95% ELD option at the last work session, that was the first time we saw that too. So I don't think that there was consensus that night. It was the first time we had seen it, and we were thinking about whether that was the best way to do it. But to now make a resolution with the assumption that the board was all there on that, I just don't think is accurate. So I think that what I would prefer is if this resolution said 95 or 100, and then we had the conversation about that. And if we really want ELD to be in there, we have a conversation about that. But all the rest of it is out. But
Okay, let me do a check with the rest of the board. Where's the rest of the
Dan?
board?
Yeah, that's fine with me.
It's not fine with me. I think
Okay.
I think we're required, and I think where we were headed, and I disagree, Shelley. I think we did have consensus on the last one, but I agree it's been a shifting target a little bit. Is that I think if we don't have a plan and we don't talk about a plan by July 1st, we've waived that opportunity, and I, for one, am not willing to waive that opportunity. And we can't do anything by statute and we haven't proposed to do anything for the next budget year. So what I thought we were trying to do was to give ourselves time to actually look at this over the course of the next year. And so I wouldn't want a resolution that forecloses us from doing that, and that's what I hear you saying, Shelley, is we should just go strictly 95 and 100 and not have the program discussion. And I, for one, am not willing to have that conversation yet, and I don't think we're ready to have that conversation yet. We don't have the numbers. We haven't. So this allows us to have time to. So it's a plan to have a plan, and I would not want to have a resolution that doesn't allow us to do that.
Kitty, what are you?
Yeah, and I did not hear it that way. I thought we can still move forward with a plan.
Okay, so it seems to me there's some confusion around the wording
I think
of
there's
this
major
resolution.
confusion, which is why I would say we were not in consensus the last time we talked about this. Obviously not, so.
Sorry, so Kitty?
So I didn't get a chance to see this before tonight because I was out of town, and anyway. So if I'm reading it correctly, they'll get 95% with the formula of dividing by the per pupil count, or they'll get
What's already negotiated
Yeah,
in their charter contract.
right. So-
Whichever's higher.
Right. So this isn't cutting anything for now from any of the schools, is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And I didn't understand that if we don't do a plan this year, we can never do a plan.
My understanding is the statute requires us to have a plan in place by July 1st. And I don't want to be the test case that if we don't have one in place, if we can try to put one in later. So I think we need to have a plan, at least a plan to have a plan in place by July 1st.
But we can change the plan, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so we could put a placeholder plan, just so that we have the room to create a plan. Is that correct?
That's my understanding. And it's important for people to understand that nothing will happen this year. Everything is status quo. There will be no cuts to charter schools. There'll be nothing happening this year to the charter schools. We have a pretty favorable budget thanks to some increases from the legislature, and everybody will share in that. Leslie?
So based on what I'm hearing, what would you think about the 95 or 100%? You can have that conversation. And then taking out the other detailed language, but leaving in, do you see the paragraph there on page 2 at the bottom, where at least we call out the statutory special groups that are in the statute as things that the board might look at in the future, but take out the special ELD language, leaving in the alternative education campus, special ed, and those areas that are called out specifically in the statute. On page 2, or at least I'm looking at
You're
a red
talking
line
about the
version.
board reserves the right.
The board reserves the right. Do you see that second to the last paragraph on page 2?
So why would you take out ELD?
Well, I'm just proposing
Okay.
if that's too specific for other board members.
Well, why wouldn't you just put it in that list of
You
things?
would.
Yeah.
You'd add
just
it to the
back.
list down there, yeah.
Sorry, Kitty, did you have a question?
I think so. So if we did the ELD, the hybrid, 95% and ELD, then would it be 5% of all mill levy overrides that are available legally to use for ELD would be used for it?
No, the way that
Okay.
I understand the calculation would be, we would look at the cost of the ELD program that the district provides to the students with those needs. Take that dollar amount off of the total mill levy dollar amount, and then what's left would be distributed at 95%.
Oh, okay, so it wouldn't
So
be
that number would, I guess,
adding.
fluctuate from year to year.
Yeah, so that's not adding to ELD? It's just, I guess I just don't quite understand that part of it.
It's not adding additional expenditures to ELD, it's just taking that and funding it out of the mill levy overrides.
Okay, and then, so if we did that proposal with the 95% or whichever is higher, and isn't everybody negotiated at 100? Except for, well,
It varies.
oh, okay.
I mean, it's pretty complicated.
Yes, somewhat.
Oh, okay.
If you were here when we passed the levy, then you are getting 100%, with a few exceptions from
Yep.
some of the old levies that are in contract language. But to be in compliance with state statute through this resolution, we would give additional resources to Justice High.
Yeah.
And the intent would be to keep the other charter schools, they wouldn't lose any money, at least for the time being. It would be to keep them whole.
Okay, I think I understand that. Yeah, because I'm not interested in pulling the rug out from under charter schools, or any school for that matter, so, yeah.
Donna?
So what about the 9 schools and the ELD and how that?
I'm going to have to talk to Kristen tomorrow and find out exactly what she was referring to, because I don't know whether those are 9 schools that have needs that aren't being served or whether they're 9 schools that aren't
She
qualifying.
said there were 9 schools
Yeah.
not participating in the program, and from what I
Yeah.
understand from reading this bill, that if a charter school even chooses not to participate in a program like transportation,
Mhm.
let's say, they still get the funds from it. So are we giving our funding to these 9 schools that are not participating?
Well, I'm not telling you that Kristen was speaking of 9 charter schools. So I need to talk to Kristen tomorrow.
Well,
Yeah.
so.
Let me
if you
talk to
remember,
Kristen
Donna,
tomorrow.
When we looked at the list, there are schools, including some of our charters, that had very low numbers in ELD. They didn't get FTE. That's what I thought she was referring to.
And I need to talk to her. So I will clarify tomorrow and get information out to you.
So the important part of looking at that is that we treat our charters and non-charters in the same fashion when it came to this distribution of ELD, and that showed that we would, because the schools that had such low numbers didn't get the FTE, and I think what I heard Kristen say is that they needed to train those teachers so that they would be able to provide the services in those schools. We just had 9 schools where we didn't have that in effect yet.
I mean, the students are entitled to the services they need. So she was talking about if their neighborhood school is a non-program school, they need the services, they've been transported to a program school to
Right.
get the services.
And so she was hoping at some point to be able to service them in their neighborhood school. But there were only 9 schools that fit that category.
Correct, but I think some of our schools are also, charter schools even, are using, I think the water gets muddied when we talk about FTE and not actually dollars being spent. Because that FTE gets distributed in many different ways, whether it's para, counselors, divided up. And I think our charters are serving that SPED population and our English language learners in, go
Sorry,
ahead.
finish.
In various ways.
So can I just respond to that?
Of course you can.
That's partially true, but not totally true. If you look at the percentages, our charters are not serving the same percentage of special ed as our neighborhood schools. And so I think part of what this is allowing us to do is, and you're right, Donna, it's hard to figure out, which is why we need the year to look at it. Because 1375 assumes certain budgeting processes and procedures that we don't have in place. So we service, as you know, because you were in special ed, we service the kids where they are as a system. And that's what we do. But a couple of the charters aren't part of that system. And so we just need some time to look at this. Several of our charters are part of that system and get the services through BVSD. So all this does is allow us to get some more clarity around this, which is what I think, given the conversation we're having here, we could all use.
Can I take us back to the resolution? Do you want to accept that for study tonight and then we bring it back, or do you want us to walk away and revise the resolution?
I think I'm hearing we need to revise the resolution. Is that what I'm hearing, board members?
Well, I have another comment.
Okay,
maybe
Shelley.
That will help. So I'd just like to point out, I don't know of another district that's doing this. I mean, that's coming up with some sort of random plan to address HB 1375. So I'm not sure why we are. And I don't understand why, if we're going to move forward with this ELD thing, how can we do that in all fairness? I mean, there are many schools in this district where we're not taking that same look at it. And, you know, I don't want to single any school out, but there are plenty of schools that don't have much of an ELD population in our district. And so if we're going to be fair, we would look at every one of those. And we're not doing that. So why are we singling out the charter schools to do that? I just don't understand the logic of that.
I actually think we are doing that. I think that's what that chart that we had a couple weeks ago showed, is that schools that had low populations were not getting the FTE. And so we would be treating them fairly. But this is why I think we just need the placeholder so that we can have the conversation going forward.
Well, by placeholding, though, you're just creating another year of anxiety. I just don't understand why we would want to do this. It's not like a charter school's planning horizon is 1 year. They're trying to staff and plan several years out, just like the school district is. And so why wouldn't we just give them the certainty of knowing that they're going to get what they used to get? They're doing a great job. You heard it from parents, from students, from teachers, from administrators. There's no reason to cut their funding in any way. We have other ways of making things equitable in this district. We don't need to do it by cutting charter school funding.
So the question's, what is the resolution going to say, and how do we go forward? And we can continue to have that conversation. So I'm just trying to, the question I thought on the table was, do we want to revise this resolution? How do we want to bring it back so that we can continue the conversation? Kitty?
I'm fine with revising it. I would not want to take away the second to last paragraph, I think it is, that gives us the option to come up with a plan that we might think would work better for our students. And we might think we don't have one that works better, but if we throw out the opportunity to develop a plan, I think we're missing an opportunity because we need to be equitably funding everybody.
So bring back a revised resolution for study at our next meeting. Is that what I'm hearing?
I think that's what I'm hearing. Revise the resolution. I guess I would also ask, though, I understand some of the points you want revised, you want revision in, but I don't know that we have all those points. So I'm wondering if we could just go across and you could tell me if there are other things you want in the revision real quickly.
Yeah, I don't know. What I would like to see is a simpler resolution that says we're either going to fund at 95 or 100%, leave out the ELD, and I don't know if we don't do a quote plan this year, whether that second to the last paragraph is even relevant, because we could put it in a resolution, but I don't know if by law we can create a plan if we just end up going with 95 or 100% this year. So somebody's going to have to tell us that before you leave in that second to the last paragraph. But I don't think we reached consensus on the ELD deduction last time, and I don't know why it would automatically be in the resolution. I think what we're really concerned about is the 95 or the 100% at this point.
Sam, anything else?
I like the second to last paragraph, and I would leave it in there, but I was responding, Shelley, to your comment about why we're referencing, I know why we're referencing 2025, because that's when the peak-to-peak contract expires, but I don't know why that particular date, which is so far out in the future when almost none of us will still be on the board, needs to be in there.
Donna.
Yeah, also, it seems to me that 2025 is to ensure that we hold to peak-to-peak's contract. And so I agree that taking it out, I don't want to wait 7 years. I think this shows that we're going to try to do something, but the second to last paragraph, let's see, where is it?
Starts with the board reserves.
Well, let's even move up further. In connection with the implementation of this House Bill 1375 plan, the board will ensure that no later than July 1st, each charter school contract is aligned with resulting plan. I wouldn't put any, just align with the plan. So there's lots of verbiage in there that I think could be adjusted. And I think I already sent you earlier today just one comment that I had, like taking out will and could. Just little things. So that's my thoughts.
Kitty?
Did I say I was going to?
No, we're just going around the table to see.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm going to ask Melissa, because I think we asked this, if we want to have a plan, we have to say it now,
We
right?
need to call it a plan
Yeah.
and pass it before July 1.
Yeah, so I definitely want to keep the option to have a plan, and so I definitely want that. I don't see any reason not to say that every charter school's, new contracts would not be aligned with the plan. We would, if we have a plan, we'd want them to be aligned with it. So I'm okay with that. The date doesn't really matter that much to me. But otherwise, I would keep it as it is.
Shelley?
And I think, given all this conversation, it needs to come back on study.
Yeah,
not-
I agree. And just, Shelley, in response to your comment that no other districts are doing this, I don't think we can compare ourselves to other districts. Every district has unique contracts with their charters and unique funding arrangements and unique interpretations of this. I don't think that benefits us right now to try to guess without knowing.
I haven't heard of one, so.
So, and every district is unique in the number of charters they have and the relationship that they have at their charter schools. So that gives us an opportunity to figure this out for what works in BVSD.
Yeah, I think most don't have as good a relationship as we do have, and I don't know why we would want to jeopardize that.
And
Nobody wants to jeopardize it.
And answer me, don't we need to honor the contracts that we've currently have in place?
Yes.
I have a question.
Yes.
Question for Shelley. So what districts have you heard from or heard about?
I haven't heard of any that have done this.
Okay, so, but you haven't heard of any that haven't done
I've
this?
heard it from people who have said that there's not a single district they know of that's doing this.
Okay.
So Cindy, I would favor keeping the language in.
Say that again.
I would favor keeping the second to last paragraph language.
Second to
in.
last paragraph, that language.
And I am strongly in favor of making sure that we have a plan, so that we have the option as we go forward to look at what this is. I strongly believe that all our children, that all our schools should support all our children, and that some schools shouldn't be exempt from supporting all of our students. And right now, the system that we have, we don't do that.
Kathy? So how about if we try and create a simplified resolution based on what we've heard tonight and try and get that to you sooner so that you have some time to look at it and ask us questions before the 12th and then bring it back for study on the 12th?
That sounds good.
Okay.
I think to an earlier email from Shelley, we may be headed towards a meeting the end of June, even if it's just on this issue, which should be fine. Any other comments, board members? Thank you, Melissa, for bringing this forward and for your patience. And we'll look forward to getting the resolution and giving feedback to Cindy and staff as we go forward. Does that sound good? Okay, so we're finally to agenda setting. And I apologize, I don't have Tina's cheat sheet of what's coming up on agenda and all of that. I know we have budget coming up. Is there anything? Yeah, it's in board docs, but I didn't pull it up yet. So is there anything we want to add? I know, Shelley, you'd like to add a conversation around web filtering. When would you?
So right now, what's on for, do you want to hear what's on for June 12th?
Sure.
Common Assessment Implementation Update, contract to install cameras on buses. So that's something I'd like to add to the agenda setting. I sent you that paragraph that inadvertently got left out of the camera policy. And I'd like to have the board look at inserting that back into the policy. And so I would love to have that on agenda setting. Ratifying the.
Shelley, could you send that again?
Yeah.
So I can double check that I have it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Ratifying the BVEA contract, HB 1375, which would now be study instead of action. And then budget adoption is on for action. A CBOC update is on for information. And then the cancellation of the June 26th meeting was on for consent, but I think we're rethinking that.
Yep.
So I would,
Is there anything you'd add other than the addition to the policy that was deleted?
yeah, I want to bring back the student memorial discussion, because we never really resolved that, and we're still getting emails from that dad who's waiting for us to decide what that's going to look like. I think that we need to start thinking seriously about trying to get a cell phone policy in place before the beginning of the next school year. So that would look like, with 2 meetings left, that would look like something's got to be on study next time. And I've thrown out a straw man, which I'm happy to have discussion about. And so if we want to use that as a straw man, or if we want the district to bring forward a straw man, I don't think it matters, as long as we have that discussion, I think. And I think we also need to talk about whether we want to take some action with regard to some of these technology concerns that don't cost us any money at this point. Things like blocking gaming, blocking social media, blocking Google Chat, those kinds of simple things that could be done at no cost. I think we need to have a conversation about that before the end of the year.
Do you mean the end of the year, like June 30, or the end of the year, December?
No, I mean, sorry, the end of the year, as in before we go on break in July, so
Okay,
that
just
some
wanted to
things are
clarify that.
decided for the school year coming up. Yeah. So those are the things I had.
Sam, do you have anything? Donna? Kitty?
I agree with Shelley.
I just am struggling with how we add all that in I don't have a problem, and I think we can certainly, what I'm going to do is punt this to the board president. Having a study item on another study description around technology and cell phone use. I think we have to figure out a way to add that to our agenda, probably on June 12th, with the idea that if we could come to some consensus, we would be able to put it on action by the end of June. That's
So, Kathy, did you suggest we do a study session, or did
No.
you suggest?
Add it as a study item to the agenda.
We add a study item, thank you.
And I think I hear 2 areas. It could be a long meeting. One is cell phone, and the other is technology, no-cost technology issues. And we may have to flesh that out between now and June 12th. So any other issues to add to agenda setting, or any other issues for the good of the order? Thank you, staff, for hanging in there for a long meeting, and to our audience for hanging in there. This meeting is adjourned.